All right, Kingkillers, we're covering chapters 108 to 110 in this episode. We cover Kvothe and Tempe leaving the crew to head to Ademre after Tempe gets in trouble for teaching Kvothe their secrets. Then we get their marathon training session on the road, and Shehyn begins to test Kvothe before casting her judgment. We also dive into Spinning Leaf, the Adem and music, and I begin my case for why I think the Adem are so gifted at fighting. So sit back and enjoy.
I got a scope zoomed in on the sniper in the trees. What's around if the devil wanna flee? I got a scope zoomed in on the sniper in the trees.
All right, welcome back to the Kingkiller podcast. Dan, got with me Scotch drinking Tim.
No.
He's already hammered at the start of the episode. He's on his, what is this, like your eighth pint of scotch?
Third. It's not a pint. It's not scotch. It is whiskey though. And it's the third one. So, third glass, not a pint. So, but yeah, I
it's a pint-sized glass. He's drinking full glasses of straight whiskey.
I like that. I just had a few glasses, and the glasses are like a massive, tank. And people just chugging it down.
That's what you do, and they say you can drink a glass of wine or a glass of beer or whiskey. They don't specify how big the glass is. You're good to go.
Yeah, just make it a glass slide and just pour it straight down your gullet.
Yeah, so you guys be prepared. It might get a little rowdy. Tim might
wonky.
go off the rails here. Getting a little baby deer leg by the end of this end of this episode.
What?
You've seen the baby deer leg guys when they get a little too tipsy when they were walking like a newborn baby deer where they can barely stand.
I mean, that's super hammered.
Yes, the best kind.
It's funny because I just watched Zab Judah get knocked out.
Yeah, he did the baby deer. Yeah,
but he did it with like what I envision it looks like when someone breaks their Achilles if they're pushing down. Like his foot jumped out as he tried to overcorrect. Yeah, you could tell he really he had practiced or he had really thought out a lot what to do if I go down, get up as fast as possible. And he just overcorrected, and it's worth looking at. It's a crazy knockout.
I don't think, there's one of the best knockouts ever, Zab Judah versus Kashya Zhu. And Kashya Zhu cracked him on if you put in like Zab Judah and Kostya, Kostyas or something like that. But you'll find it. It'll pop up immediately. But yeah, Zab Judah gets cracked on the chin, drops to the ground, immediately stands back up, turns to the ref and goes like, "I'm okay," and then falls back down on his face again.
He did like the way I see him say "okay" is like when someone's on nitrous or something. Like,
yeah, all right.
He even like pointed with his glove where he's like, "No, I'm good," and he's so very much taken aback after he falls down. He's like, no, I just fell. It's like, you have no idea what that looked like.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know.
He got rocked.
He was so
mad at the ref for stopping the fight. And it was dude, you got rocked.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, like, he gets up, falls back down, and then, again, he's very upset because he doesn't realize how bad it looked. And then once you see it back, you're like, whoa, okay. That's why they stopped the fight. They're worried you're going to get like your,
There's a Tyson one where he drops a guy that he tries to stand up like 3 times and falls over 3 straight times. And that one's hilarious too. And he keeps getting mad at himself because he keeps trying to stand up and he keeps falling over and he's like hitting the ground like, come on, legs, work.
Come on, you're better than this. It's like, nah, bro, you don't understand what just happened.
He punched you in the head and it broke your legs, man. You're done. Just give it up.
Your brain.
Legs do not work. Your brain and legs, they're not connected anymore.
Yeah.
They've been separated them from your body, the connection.
Yeah, it happens.
But yeah, so we're going to start off with getting into chapter 108 titled Quick. In this chapter, they remain at the Pennyworth Inn for a few days and rest up. And then when they head out, Kvothe and Tempe reignite their training, get caught by some of the other Adem mercenaries, and Kvothe agrees to head to Ademre with Tempe.
Yeah, it's a transitional chapter, right? I mean, basically they're moving on to the next sort of theme that we get into, but it really does shift quite a bit. It's a lot of training, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it starts off, we spent a few days at the Pennyworth Inn while our welcome was warm. We had our own rooms and all our meals for free. Fewer bandits meant safer roads and more customers, and Penny knew our presence at the inn would draw a better crowd than fiddle playing any night. And so it's just winding down this time with these guys, and basically just kind of a real short epilogue to their time together. It's basically what this amounts to. But
it's a bunch of good stuff. I mean, like, it's pretty comfortable for everybody, right? Like, Martin gets to get pretty wasted, basically. Daydan and Hespe get bump uglies. And Kvothe gets to continue to be Billy Badass.
Yeah, and he said his minor injuries from the fight with the bandits were long since gone, but I had newer ones, mostly consisting of a heavily scratched back. So apparently they got like a real bad stray cat problem at the Pennyworth Inn.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, maybe he had a rash and he was scratching it. Well,
yeah,
what is really funny to me, I know we talked about this prior, but I mean, that's it. Other than that, he mentions Losi's attention and Tempe's training left him pretty exhausted. That's it. That's all the sex that's mentioned.
With Losi, yeah, it's described in 2 sentences, and doesn't go into the only detail you get is like, it was vigorous or strenuous or whatever he says.
Yeah,
I mean, the way he describes it is basically, he just describes it. He doesn't like go into any details on it.
Yeah,
like, there's no like description of any of the acts.
Yeah.
Any of the acts.
There's no eroticism at all.
No.
And that's very much what is insinuated by people's statements online about these chapters. It's very much insinuated. I mean, I think you mentioned in the comments that book 2 is all about sex, which is crazy to say, right? Because again, I mean, it's virtually just insinuated here. And frankly, it speaks to Rothfuss's ability.
And you don't even know, like, the heavily scratched back. Well, that could be anything. That could literally be anything. Like Rothfuss is wont to do, he leaves it up where there's many different interpretations.
You know what?
I prefer to believe that that they got stray cats that jump on your back and scratch you while you try to sleep.
Now that we're doing it, you know what I prefer? I prefer Bill Burr stand up where he describes somebody at the airport eating an Egg McMuffin.
And then scratching their back. Yeah.
Scratching their back on one of the load-bearing poles as they ate an Egg McMuffin, and then took the bag and wiped their face with it.
Was it the bag or the wrapper?
No, it was the bag.
The bag? Yeah. Bag. Nice. Yeah. That's a good look.
He's a wild animal at the airport. Literally like what a bear would do.
Yeah.
This is hilarious. So yeah, that could be, who knows?
Yeah, so there's many interpretations
insinuated
with anything what he does. But yeah, and then he gets I taught Tempe the basics of the lute, and he resumed teaching me how to fight. My training consisted of short, terse discussions concerning the Lithani and long, strenuous periods of practicing the Katan. And then he's like, I also pieced together a song about my flurrying experience. I originally called it In Twilight First, which you have to admit wasn't a very good title. Luckily, the name didn't stick, and these days most folk know it as the song Half Sung. I assume, it's pretty obvious that the song is Like a Virgin by Madonna is what they'll do.
Well, I was going to say, he said it was easy to remember. It was like really catchy, so I assumed it was Right Said Fred. It's just like the original version of I'm Too Sexy. That's just what it is, because it's all about Kvothe,
Yeah, but it's also like he has his time with Florian, and there's no mention of him having sex with Florian in that song. But like a virgin touched for the very first time, that really describes exactly what was happening.
Oh, what happened
that,
to Kvothe?
Yeah.
Mm. Well,
I think Madonna is a good placeholder for Kvothe to begin with. I think they're pretty much the same person, live the same life.
Kvothe and Madonna, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've lived pretty much the same exact life.
I mean, I will admit, Madonna is one of the few of that era that I can actually listen to and actually still like kind of enjoy the songs. There's so many from like that era that was pop that is garbage. That's almost like embarrassing. I liked some of the songs, but Madonna actually it holds up. So
yeah,
I'll accept it.
It's no Vanilla Ice, but you know,
yeah.
But yeah, and then he's like, since folk kept asking for stories, I shared a few other interesting events from my life. I told them how I'd managed to get admitted to the university when I was barely 15 years old. I told them how I'd gained entry into the Arcanum in a mere 3 days' time. I told them how I had called the name of Wind in a furious rage after Ambrose broke my lute. And he's like, unfortunately, by the third night, I was out of true stories, and since my audience was still hungry for more, I simply stole a story about Ilian and put myself in his place instead, stealing a few pieces from Tamerlane while I was at it. It's like, I'm not proud of that, and in my defense, I'd like to say I had quite a bit to drink. What's more, there were a few pretty women in my audience. There's something powerfully beguiling about the excited eyes of a young woman. They can pull all manner of nonsense out of a foolish young man, and I was no exception to this rule. Which I love because that is 100% true.
Yeah, I like the realism there. That's, yeah. I mean, his age, he's definitely, and he should be feeling himself after what he's accomplished. I mean, the last...
I was down by a college recently out here, and so I was walking to go get some food at this spot. There's a ton of college kids there, and you can just see the awkward, like overexcited, like too amped up, like just theatrics of a lot of the guys trying to impress girls, where you just feel like you're watching like gorillas, like sitting there going and smacking the ground and like being just over the top with it. It's like, man, dude, just settle down, spazzes.
Yeah, I mean,
but
that's
how you are when you're young. I was the same way.
Yeah, that's part of like, yeah, man, like watching. There's not like going to bars after like, especially after like, after a while of like just, you know, having your shit together, but then actually being married and going to bars and watching people date. And it's just like, man, like just seeing the mannerisms of like, oh, that guy's, it's not going well for him. Or like you can spot people on a first date and it's not going well, you know, or people on like a third date, you can tell that you can see the energy, you know what I mean? Like it's really funny how you can.
And then, like, you see someone on their, like, 50th date, and neither one of them are talking to each other. And it's like, yeah, those people, they're in a long, long committed relationship.
They don't even look at one another. And even if if there's something said, it's like, what? They're annoyed at one another's presence.
Shut up. Why are you talking to me?
Oh, shit. But, yeah, no, for sure. It's you know, I was in Boston, and I don't know if we were near fucking Harvard or MIT or whatever the fuck, but it was really funny watching these two groups where it's literally split down the middle. All the girls on one side, all the guys on another side. I would hesitate to call them guys. They're like boys, man. And just like the actions, it was like, man, am I obviously getting older, but looking at them, I'm like, man, they all look like they're like 15 to me. It's like, yeah, they're all like 20. You know, they're just in college, basically, so they're all like 19, 20. They might as well be 15, 14 years old, you know?
All super, super loud, like pushing each other, you know, like making a scene where it's like, man, why you guys think this is the way? I guess it's, you know, it's that peacocking thing, even though they're not really like, it's not calculated. It's not like a plan. They're just trying to be boisterous for the attention, any kind of attention to, you know, because they don't know what to do. It's like, man, you can definitely see when it's like some guys are trying. It's a, you know, and when you're young, the girls don't know how, the girls are in a similar boat of inexperience. So they will take that kind of dumbassery that guys will throw out there. It's amazing to me what was successful for me as like a 20-year-old guy. It was preposterous. And like, why were these women accepting my outrageous fucking maneuvers?
Basically process of elimination. At least if you're able to get close enough and keep moving forward, then you got a shot. No, if nobody else is, then, and that was always the key. Just fucking say some shit.
Say some confidence words, and confidence and inexperience combined.
The key, and if anybody wants some real advice, just make them laugh, man. Go up with something not ridiculously, some observation of something.
Oh yeah, because that's simple. Just be funny.
Okay.
Just be funny. That's all you got to do. Like, oh, okay, thanks.
I was gonna say that's real good advice for somebody that's not.
What you want to do is just be funny, have a really good personality, be charismatic. Like, yeah, dude. If I had that, I'd be using it.
Yeah, I would
think I'm like holding that in my back pocket, like going in, like, don't be funny. Whatever you do, don't make her laugh. Last thing you want to do. Like, no, you want to make her laugh. Like, really? Like, are you sure?
I mean, outside of that, if you have some drugs you can offer, that might work.
Yeah.
Dude, that was one of the best pickup lines. Like, I had, like, in LA originally going to LA was like, you guys want to go smoke? Like, yeah. And that's all it took. It was like, all right, let's go. I mean, it's like, this works like a charm. As long as you got some. Shit, this is easy.
But yeah, and then so he's like, they were he was also talking about like the growing relationship between Daydan and Hespa, and he's like, they were a delight to watch. Daydan was gentler, quieter. Hespa's face lost much of its hardness. They spent a great deal of time in the room catching up on their sleep, no doubt.
He has a couple little quips here, like with the back scratch and catching up on their sleep, no doubt. Little jokes, little winks to the reader.
Yeah, and then they start heading out, but they took their time and they were letting their injuries heal, and they also didn't want to leave each other's company. They knew their time was coming to an end, so they kind of tried to draw it out as much as they could. And after they had left, they end up running into some troopers. And this is where you get the poem from the little boy about the lackless, where he's like, walks up, he's like, hello, the troopers. I called out. They looked up nervously, then relaxed. They saw the loot across my back. Hello, the bard. I laughed and shook their hands. No bard here, just a bit of a singer. Hello, the same, the older man said, smiling. Which way are you headed? North to south. Yourself? They relaxed further once they knew I was heading in a different direction, east to west, he said. How's your luck been? So, finds out, this is not, an Ademre troop, and they were using a bear, which he looked down on, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a ragtag troop. So he goes, things were better when we had the bear. One of the younger men said, focal pay to see bear bait. Went sick of a dog bite, the other man explained. Died near a year ago. That's a shame, I said. Bear's hard to come by. They nodded a silent agreement. I've got a new song for you. What will you trade me for it? So he ends up telling him he'll sing it for him. They're like, we're on much trade, and how do we know your song's worth anything? It's like, judge for yourself. Then he sings it, and I like the part where he's like, I had to sing it to him twice, so that I had to repeat it twice so he would catch all of it, even though it was easy to remember and simple to sing. And he was like, as I've said, they weren't Ademre.
He mentions a few times he uses this exchange to elevate the Ademre. And 100%. Which is pretty important. I mean, that gets done kind of throughout, but it's also it is important because of how big they do sort of loom in the world. It's, again, very interesting. I know we talked about this many episodes ago, where it's basically them and the Tinkers have this worldly presence, very historical, very traditional, and people respect them who know their business. People who are more sophisticated. It seems. Basically everybody, and everybody knows if you wrong a tinker, you're a piece of shit. The funny thing is with the Rue, everyone shits on them.
Yeah.
Right, except the most elevated in society seems that they understand, or like the most traditional seem to respect them to a greater degree.
Yeah, and obviously I think that there's something to the fear factor with the Tinkers, because otherwise I think that they would be in a similar boat. And I think part of the reason that the Rue are so looked down upon is the fact that they are nomadic people, that they're not living in one place. They don't have like their own settlement, their own community. And so they're traveling to other communities, and you're always the stranger everywhere you go.
It's situational.
You're always the outsider, and so it's just everybody's kind of looking at you a little scan-eyed to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so when you are that group, you're already, it's a natural position to dislike them. And then when you combine it with people use their name to rob mm-hmm. towns and rape and pillage and that kind of shit, then yeah, it's a recipe for getting people to look down on it. But then you also have the Aturans set the people, propagandize the people against the Rue, where they were hunting the Rue down and just hunting them down and killing them. So there's obviously something was going on there. There's got to be some reason that they were trying to kill off the Rue, and we don't know exactly what was going on that made them, public enemy number one, but they were, enemies to, and it could just be a simple matter of, the Aturan Empire is trying to spread their message, their word, and if this traveling group is going around and they're spreading actual, history that contradicts their propaganda, that would be someone you would want to get rid of. So it could be something along those lines.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, it could also be, there was the whole, there was the whole struggle through the religions too. So, I mean, it could have been caught up in that as well. And that's stories, right? I mean, that's the difference of opinion. And if there's a difference of opinion and someone's swaying, able to, use murder to try to gain their,
I wouldn't think it's necessarily like about religion, just because like the Rue, it's not a religion, and so they're not going around spreading religion. They're performing plays and telling stories, and so I would think it could be related to the religion in the fact that if they're telling stories that contradict
that's what I mean,
their story, then it's at that point, that's what I'm talking about. It's along the lines of they have their propaganda, their message that they want to spread, and if the Rue are going around contradicting it, that would be a problem, because this is a society where a large part of your information is coming from people traveling from place to place, and they're telling stories and singing songs. That's a lot of the means of communication as far as spreading of news.
Yeah. Either way, I mean, it's pretty rough. Which it's again, that dichotomy though is really interesting, because they're so shat upon. They have this history that's complicated, but our main character is the most prideful you could imagine of being Ademre,
Yeah.
So it's a cool position to put the reader in.
Yeah, and then the little boy says he made up his own verse to Tinker Tanner. I once saw a fair farmer's daughter on the river bank far from all men. She was taking a bath when I saw her. She said she didn't feel right if a man caught a sight, so she soaped herself slowly all over again. I laughed. That's good. But how about this? I once saw a fair farmer's daughter on the river bank far from all men. She confessed to me once when I caught her that she didn't feel clean if her bathing was seen, so she washed herself all over again. The boy thought about it. I like mine better. But he said after a moment's consideration, I like that. It's like, nah, mine's better. Yours isn't that good.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Kvothe, it had that remix over it, Like they used to do to all those.
Remix. Yeah,
that was
just too much.
Most annoying thing that would happen. What is that, like the early 2000s?
Yeah, late 90s. And it was throughout the whole song. It was like, dude, I got it, man. I don't need you to keep repeating that it's a remix.
Ruins the song. Completely ruins the song. Where's it? Remix?
There's so many like hype men on songs that, they weren't rappers.
Everybody's trying to be DJ Clue.
They wanted to be on a record, and so they needed to be throwing in their own 2 sentences into or two lines into every verse of a song.
And it's one thing to do it between songs, but doing it throughout, where you're like screaming over the chorus, like, dude, this is now not listenable. You made this inaudible. It was a great song. Now it's not. So now fuck your album, basically. I think this is terrible. You ruined it.
But yeah, and then he goes, he thought some more. I heard Alvaron's getting married to the Lackless woman. I know a poem about Lackless. The young boy chimed in again and began, 7 things stand before the entrance to the Lackless door. Hush, the older man cuffed the boy gently alongside his head. He looked up apologetically. Boy's got a good ear, but not one lick of manners. Actually, I said I'd like to hear it. And so it gets a little bit of gossip from him that the mayor and Maelwyn got married. Mm-hmm. So he knows that deal has been done.
It's tremendously lucky. I mean, in retrospect, it is tremendously lucky that this kid knows this poem or this song, whatever you want to call it.
For us, for Kvothe, it doesn't even seem to ring a bell. Like, I mean, it doesn't seem to have any kind of impact on Kvothe. I would be surprised if it doesn't come up later. But yeah, he doesn't even... He's just like, oh, interesting, basically, is his reaction to it. But yeah, it seems to have much more significance than what Kvothe realizes.
That's kind of funny, too, when you consider... If you would think, I don't know, man, in a way, I know we have the process of the whole book and the whole story and everything else, but what his dad did, his focus to piece together all this information was going around and finding songs from everyone that he could find. Mm-hmm. You would consider in a way that Kvothe would be more sensitive, right, to trying to piece together these things as well.
He's not even... The mystery of who his mom is not something he's even concerned about.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
It's not something that's something he's even thinking about and needs to be solved. It's just like, that was my mom and she's dead, so there's nothing to think about anymore. What's the point?
And not only that, it's painful to even.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's like, why dig into it? What good is it going to do? Like, he's not thinking like, my mom, it's a huge mystery who her parents are. She's probably extremely wealthy, from an extremely wealthy and old lineage, and I'm probably from an extremely noble family. Like, it's just not even on his radar of something to think about.
Yeah, true.
So he doesn't consider it. But yeah, and then we get 7 things stand before the entrance to the Lackless door. 1 of them a ring unworn, 1 a word that is forsworn, 1 a time that must be right, 1 a candle without light, 1 a son who brings the blood, 1 a door that holds the flood, 1 a thing tight held in keeping, then comes that which comes with sleeping. So the 7 things that, stand before the entrance to the Lackless door. So I think that you have, this could be how you get into the 4-plate door. This might be like how you get to the 4-plate door, and then the doors of stone is the Lackless door. So this is things that stand before the Lackless door. Or it could be that the Lackless door is the 4-plate door and the doors of stone are behind it, or something along those lines. Or it could be that they're both the same thing. I just don't think that is what's going to be the case. I think that circle of gray stones is going to be the doors of stone. I think the circle of gray stones in Fey Reunion is likely going to be the doors of stone. But I do think that the 4-plate door is locking back that an entrance into Fey Reunion is what my guess is, which we've talked about in previous episodes.
Yeah.
But
so there's a couple things I just wanted to get clarity on. One, so 2 things you just said there. One would be the ring unworn would be the circle of gravestones, right?
Correct. That's my guess.
And then the door that holds the flood, that's the door. It's basically, that's where you're talking about, is in Mir Terrenial or Fey Reunion.
Yeah, it could be that, holding the flood is keeping that door locked from Fey Reunion, or it could be talking about like It holds the flood because if you get into Fabrianial, you can get to the Doors of Stone and release
Pestilence.
Release Ajax, in the Scrael and Skin Dancers, that kind of thing.
So then, go ahead.
Well, you get the one award that is Forsworn. So I think that's probably like Ajax's name, true name, because it's something like the Florian doesn't say his name. She's unwilling to speak his name. We don't speak his name here and those kind of things. And even though he's locked behind the doors of stone, she says, but yeah, I think it's got to be because of how prominent naming is into, in this world, and true names are extremely important. I think that's likely what the word is that is forsworn. One a time that must be right, and one a candle without light. I think that's a moon. A candle without light, I think, is the moon, and I think the moon has got to be at a certain phase. Maybe it's got to be a full moon or something along those lines, or a moonless night to be able to get into the Doors of Stone, or maybe just to get behind the 4-plate door.
The thing that I was thinking this time through is I was wondering if one meant one thing, one meant another, because it almost seems like redundant. If every line means one thing, nothing, and there's no reason to say that has to be the case. It doesn't have to be the case, but reading through it again after the times we've talked about, one a time that must be right. When I was making my notes, I'm like, oh, so that's full moon, and then one a candle without light. It's like, well, then is that the same thing? Because it made me think the same thing.
Well, it's saying, like, I think one a candle without light is, as I think that's likely describing the moon. Yeah. But then it's saying that there's a specific time in the moon's cycle that is important. So I could be that it's either, a full moon or a moonless night. And maybe one of those is needed to get behind the 4-plate door or for the Doors of Stone, or both. But then one a sun who brings the blood, I think that's Kvothe. And then one a door that holds the flood. Again, that can either be the 4-plate door or the Doors of Stone, or if they're all the same thing, that's what that would be talking about. And then one a thing tight held in keeping. That I think that could be the lackless box, that she holds that secret close to her vest, that they don't tell anybody about it. So I think that's what it's likely. You probably need whatever's inside that. And then
I was thinking it definitely seemed, again this time through, after having gone through it, my question was secret, and then we got, again, how much weight do you put in old Cobb stories? But what he had a secret from a book from a secret book in the library, something like that, right? Wasn't there? He had
like secret magic that he got from a book at the university or something like that. But I don't know what that would have to do with the Lacklesses.
Yeah,
well, this is specific to the Lacklesses. You would think that it would have to do with her secret. Well. Yeah. And so then comes that which comes with sleeping, and I think that could be like something to do with like naming, your sleepless mind, that kind of thing. I'm not sure exactly on that. Then comes that which comes with sleeping. I don't have a good explanation on what that would be.
It almost, thinking about that through again, it almost was like, all right, so with sleeping, you have like the dream state, and you think about sleeping mind because of what we, what we've had from Elodin and so many other circumstances where he goes into that, he like tips into that. But I wonder if it's like a certain mind state that you have to be in. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer on that one. Like, I think it might have something to do with naming, but I'm not sure. Or with shaping, I don't know. Like, maybe because she calls the shapers dreamers, so when you sleep, you dream. So maybe shaping is required. I don't know, though. I'm just purely guessing on that, because there's not anything that seems like a clear clue as to exactly what that means.
What's interesting about that, what's so far interesting about that for me is Rothfuss, once he basically finishes the story or ties this back in, the way that he writes this would be clear. You know what I'm saying? Like it would be like, oh, that makes sense. Like that would tie right in perfectly. You know what I mean? and it's hard to see that clarity now, especially with that line, because we have like sleeping mind and we have that other sort of like mind state, but there isn't. I don't know. Iax comes to mind, or Haliax comes to mind, but not really, because that doesn't unlock things.
I mean, the one of the things that would come up is, Florian calls Shapers dreamers, and so
oh yeah, that's right.
That which comes with sleeping is dreaming. So it could be that you need to be a shaper, or you need a shaper with you, which might end up being that he ends up having Ari with him.
Yeah.
When he gets to the to get behind the 4-plate door, or to get through the doors of stone, or both.
And then she gets sacrificed.
Well, no, Denna sacrifices herself. Like, I can't believe, like, you forget we've already lynched up a lot of these things.
Yeah, that's right.
Denna gets locked behind the door. She throws out her lanyard. Yeah, in the work schedule, and Ari catches it out of the air, one hands it, lifts her hand up in the air, and says, "I have the schedule."
Yeah, and then
power, like He-Man, comes down.
Well, and that launches her into management mode, which is why she also becomes manager of the boy band.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she's becomes a titan of industry from that moment.
She's gonna have to open up, in a big way.
It snaps everything into place. Like, that was what was keeping her broken, and she didn't have a career path. She didn't know what she wanted to do with her life, so she was splintered and broken and cracked. But then once she had a purpose, it all pieced her back together.
So you just need a life coach.
Yeah.
And Denna throwing that lanyard, that's her moment. That's the life coach.
Yeah.
Well, so that, I mean, a lot of things get broken in this whole thing, and maybe Denna's locked behind the doors of stone, or whatever. She's locked in, the Fae, and, there's Scrael in the world and skin dancers, but, Ari's, she's in upper management now, so maybe it's all worth it.
She's got 5 franchises, man. She's doing good. She's doing good. Running the boys.
Yeah, and running the boys. Come on. She's touring them around, Yeah,
got to give it to Rothfuss. Like, I didn't see that coming, but now that I do see it, like, it's brilliant. It's great writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then so he digs into his purse and hands him a silver noble. It's like, "What's this then?" he asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "To help with a new bear," I said. "I've been through some tight times too, but I'm flush now." They left after thanking me profusely. Poor fellows, no self-respecting brood troop would ever stoop to bear baiting. There was no skill involved, no pride in the performance, but they could hardly be blamed for their lack of Rue blood, and we troopers have to watch out for each other. No one else does.
So I thought that mention there, that lack of Rue blood, was kind of a hint to the audience, or the readers, because we want a son who brings the blood, and then within, a few within half a page, you're getting hit with that. So I thought he was being generous to try to insinuate, or try to help people out to make connections. I don't know. I definitely had that feeling this time around.
Yeah, could be. And it layers into the fact that when he's going to meet that other Rue troop who's pretending to be Rue, and it's kind of establishing, hey, we all stick together, nobody looks out for us, and then you got these pieces of shit, and this is why
nobody their name.
Yeah. And then and so Tempe and I used our walking hours to discuss the Lothani, and evenings to practice the Katan. It was becoming easier for me, and I could sometimes make it as far as as catching rain before Tempe caught some minuscule mistake and made me start over. So they're starting that training, and then he's like, the two of us had found a halfway secluded place beside the inn where we had stopped for the day. I worked my way carefully through the Katan while Tempe sat with his back to a tree practicing a basic fingering drill I had taught him with relentless determination over and over. Tempe seems like he'd make a terrible musician. Like, he would just be, like, he would be fine if he was like a karaoke band performing someone else's song. Like, he could master the exact, movements that he's supposed to replicate, but like, creating his own art seems like it would not be Tempe's thing at all.
I agree, and the funny thing is, I remember that he does learn from Kvothe, but I don't picture him doing this at all. You know what I'm saying? Like it like really doesn't fit with his character for whatever reason. Like I mean I buy that he's leaning up against a tree and trying to play the lute and he's going through scales or whatever, but it just doesn't it doesn't sink in for some reason. Or for all the reasons, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't seem an artistic type of person. He's got more of a personality than you would expect, but he's a pretty muted, direct person.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot of room for nuance with him, it seems.
And then Kvothe's like, moving with painful slowness, I began dance backward, but as soon as I placed my heel, I could tell my balance was wrong. I waited for Tempe to call out, but he didn't. I stopped the K-10 and turned to see a group of 4 Adem mercenaries walking toward us with a prowling grace. Soon the 5 of them were standing in a tight group, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, close enough that I couldn't hear the barest whisper of what they were saying or even see their hands, but I could tell from the angle of Tempe's shoulders that he was uncomfortable defensive. And so Kvothe walks up to him and gets close to him, and then Kvothe pushes out, stretched out a hand and pushed me away. Said his fingers pressed firmly against the center of my chest. Without thinking, I made break line, taking hold of his thumb and turning his wrist away from me. He loosed his hand from mine without any apparent effort, moved to trip me with chasing stone, made dance backward and got balance right this time, but his other hand struck me in the temple enough to dizzy me for a half second, not hard enough to even hurt. Quick, the mercenary said softly in a turn. It was only when I heard her voice that I realized she was a woman. I like that little aspect of it. Is like he comes walking up there, and then Kvothe just immediately goes to push him away, not saying anything, no greeting. Like, get the fuck away from me. Like he's a freaking animal. And
I love the way he writes the whole physical confrontation of the different moves and stuff. Like you don't really know what they're doing, but you're able to visualize. I mean, again, why Rothfuss is what's so great about how he writes it is you don't really know what they're doing. I'm glad I don't really know what they're doing, right? Because I'm picturing these movements. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
just like whatever.
Everybody's got their own mental image of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can create your own mental image of it,
and
it doesn't to spell it out. Yeah,
and it doesn't retract at all. I mean, to me, it even adds more to a degree because you don't really need to see it. It's a book, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to see left to right, like the exact movements. I was going to mention before we got too far away from it. So they walk up and basically Tempe's fucking jerking off in public.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like to them.
I don't think they caught him. He was just practicing hand drills. I don't know that he was necessarily practicing with the lute. So it doesn't seem like anybody has realized. It just said like he was doing like some hand drills, but our finger drills.
Well, he said my lute was back in its case and leaning up against the side of the tree when he looks back. So I don't know. That made me think he was sitting there playing it. Well, I'm just saying.
Well, it could be, but it doesn't appear like when he gets to the university, it doesn't appear that anybody knows Tempe was playing music. No one mentions it. It doesn't, doesn't get mentioned. But yeah, like Tempe would have been quickly if this was, in their version of events, this would be the equivalent of like some dudes sitting there jerking it in the middle of the field, and then some people start walking up and he's quickly tucking it away.
But worse, because also in the same area is a guy doing the thing you're not supposed to teach anybody to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's as bad as you can imagine. I mean, it's the type of thing they get him ousted, which we find out later. It's the type of thing get him ousted from his family, from his life, from his whole way of life. Plus, he's doing something that's extraordinarily inappropriate for them to do in front of others' eyes.
Yeah.
It's a wild scene for old Tempe to get caught with his pants down.
Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking.
And I like the fact that, she's like quick, mocking him. She's completely dismissive of him. And then like she puts her hand behind her back, like turns the side of him. It's not even standing toe to toe with him. Puts her hand behind her back to put it as far away from her sword as she can get it. And it's just like the level of contempt that she has for Kvothe cannot be overstated. She despises him from the very second that she sees him.
I love how Rothfuss describes it, because the beginning, we get those moves and we're like, oh, quick. So it's like, oh, so he is kind of doing it here. He is fast. And it's like, oh, he's not fast. Not only is he not fast, you're less of a threat. Like I don't worry about you whatsoever. I turn my back to you and I don't even have my hands in position to be worried about you. Like the way it's described is really fantastic.
Yeah, and then, you get the broad-shouldered one facing me, had a thin scar cutting through her eyebrow and another close to her jaw. They were the same pale silver scars Tempe had on his arms and chest, and they were far from gruesome. They made her expressionless face look oddly grim. So you're getting those mentions of they all have these scars, and then you eventually learn what it's from. It's from the tree. Is that this is them what they got from running to the tree, which puts into perspective like how bad the position could have been for Kvothe if he didn't call the name of the wind in that moment. Like he would have had to, with no practice, never having done it before, try to run to this tree when these people who live there, this is what they do with their whole life. They live there and they're getting cut up trying to get to that tree.
Now that I think about it, that the way he writes that scene is so phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
So it's so great. It's a great like culminating factor of all the things that he's sort of built. Because with the name of the wind, how he experienced with Florian, and then what this tree the whole thing is fucking amazing. And then Kvothe's theatrics, because he always has to fucking, he's always got to put the coup de grace on it, like Mr. Fancy Pants.
Yeah, it's amazingly written, but it gives good information on exactly how naming works. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in that scene.
Yeah.
But then Tempe tells him to go back, walk away, and after their meeting is done, comes walking back, and Kvothe's like, "Who were they, Tempe?" "Adem," he said simply, sitting himself back down at the foot of the tree. "Did you know them?" "Yes." I love that aspect of just the one-word answers. Like, "Who are they?" "Adem." Like, "Yeah, I mean, do you know them?" "Yes." "Care to elaborate?" "Anything else?" Like, "No, stop talking to me."
2 hours later.
Yeah. Love that aspect. That's kind of shit I would do. Like if I don't want to talk to someone and they're sitting there telling me, they keep asking me questions. If I don't want to talk to them, I will give the shortest, the most direct answer and ask no follow-up question whatsoever. Like,
it's a very clear way for the careful listener to realize he doesn't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Most people catch on.
Yes.
And most people will
get real quick. Like if you give one word responses and don't ask follow-up questions, they'll get uncomfortable and they'll stop.
Yeah, it's two things. It's either like this guy's a fucking asshole, or he's not in the mood. And if you know the person, it's like, oh, he's not in the mood.
Yeah. Even if they
What's
think
wrong?
I'm an asshole, those people are like my kryptonite. Like,
hey,
dude,
you can smile.
It's like, get away from me. Like you're pushing me down a path where I'm gonna have to be a mean person, and I don't want to be mean. I just want you to leave me alone.
I was trying to show you in a very polite way that I'm not trying to engage. That I would rather not engage. But yeah, I love the, you can smile. Like, now I want to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to kill you prior, but now I'm really enraged.
Yeah, and then so he finally, when he starts talking again, he's like, "Tomorrow I leave to Shehyn. Are those cities? Herd is city. Shehyn is my teacher. I had given some thought to what might be the matter. Are you in trouble for teaching me?" He set the loot back in the case, pressed the lid back in place. "Perhaps, yes. It is forbidden. It is most forbidden," he said. And so he's obviously in deep shit now. Like, because, Tempe's probably not thinking that what he's doing, that he's going to get caught. He knows what he's doing is troublesome for him if he gets caught, but he's probably not thinking like there's much of a chance that out in the middle of nowhere, the Adem are going to walk up to him. It's like, what are the odds that's going to happen? And, they're probably not running into a ton of foot traffic to begin with, much less run into some Adem mercenaries right as Kvothe is practicing the Katan.
Yeah, I mean it's still very, I mean, considering how bad it could go, part of me wants to say it's somewhat reckless considering how bad it could go. And I appreciate what you're mentioning, that they're in the middle of nowhere. He also did think about it long and hard before he decided to take Kvothe on. And I think he did take Kvothe on for the right reasons. And I think Shehyn finds that out really fucking fast. Like, oh, this kid does have potential.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's him thinking about it long and hard that really spoke to that. What I like about Tempe here is how he does, clearly he accepts his fate and he doesn't blame anybody. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't fucking like make Kvothe feel any guilt over it, because he's honorable in the way he's like, he gives him short answer. He's like, I'm leaving. Are you in trouble? He makes Kvothe ask him. He doesn't tell Kvothe, I'm in a lot of fucking trouble for teaching you. Kvothe has to ask him, and he's like, yes, this was bad. Yes, I could be in trouble. Yes, it could be really bad. He makes Kvothe ask him to tell him that. And the main reason why I point that out is I have had people in my life who are, frankly, not honorable people, who something bad happens to them, they immediately start throwing around everybody around them and blaming everybody else for the fucking problems, you know? So, and even when it's justified, you know, not to say I'm perfect, I've done that myself, but I like this about Tempe. It endears me to him more.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a minor thing. I mean, this is like this guy's worst nightmare, and so I'm sure they were taking precautions. Like they kept going behind buildings and that kind of stuff. It's just like who expects to run into Adem mercenary? Kvothe he's a trooper. He lived on the roads. He's never seen an Adem mercenary once in his life. So this is not like common to happen. Like you're just not running into. They're a very isolated community. There's not many of them going out wandering around. There's a very limited amount. So the odds would be low that this would happen. So it's understandable that he would be like, oh, fuck. Like, God damn it. Like, what are the fucking odds? And it's got to be Kaser Red's fucking ass. Like, she's not going to take this well.
That's a good point, too. I mean, because especially, it's not like they're at the Pennyworth. They're out on the road.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like they're in a town. And yeah, that's an important point you mentioned. Kvothe is a world traveler. He's never met an Adem until he meets Tempe. That's saying a lot. I mean, people know about them, but they don't see them often. Even in the bar, they're all like, "Hey, what's up with you guys? Why you guys get paid so much? What's up with the clothes and all that shit?" You know?
Yeah. It seems like this extremely isolated society where not a lot, to the point that anytime someone does see an Adem mercenary, it's noteworthy for them, for their experience in their life. So it's clearly not a common occurrence, but bad luck, and it had to be Kaser Red as well, who is probably the worst person, you know, at least from the Adem that we see, is the worst person to catch him teaching the Katan to a barbarian. But Kvothe goes, you know, I thought of what the Kvothe had said, the one shred of potentially useful information it had let slip in our conversation. You laughed at fairies until you saw one. Small wonder all your civilized neighbors dismissed the chantering as well. You'd have to leave your precious corners far behind before you found someone who might take you seriously. You wouldn't have a hope until you made it to the storm wall. Florian had said the Kvothe only spoke the truth. Could I accompany you? I asked. Accompany? Tempe asked, his hands moving in a graceful circle, intended to break long bones of the arm. Travel with? Follow? To heart? Yes. Would it help your trouble? Yes. I will come. I thank you.
Pretty honorable of Kvothe to do it. But it obviously also has the motivation that he just mentioned from the Kvothe. I thought it was pretty ironic that he says the one shred of potentially useful information that slip from the Kvothe. Right? Pretty ironic when everything he said was very intentional. Very pointed at him.
Yeah, Florian, no one explained to him, or I guess Florian would have been the only one, and she's not like a great fountain of information. So
a great communicator.
Someone needed to like tell him the implications of what the Kvothe is for him to like really step back and realize he should be analyzing what was said to him rather than being like, oh, it only speaks the truth. So
yeah, analyzing the intention behind what was being said, right?
Yeah, this is a malevolent force. This is like the ultimate evil in our world. Everybody knows that if you talk to the Kvothe, like if the Kvothe is on, in the picture of the play or anything like that, it's a sign that tragedy is coming. And so, like if Kvothe knew that, he would have analyzed what he said more and thought it through.
It is interesting though, because again, and I know we just talked about this, but it's such an interesting character and like a tool to create, because he knows the future. So he says what he says to create it, but it's still true, right? So it's like, doesn't matter what Kvothe does, it's still going to happen.
Well, and
that's kind of that's what's being implied.
And the fact that, the Kvothe is telling him, stick by the mayor, he'll lead you to their door, to the Emir's door. Like, that is useful information. You're hell-bent on finding more information about the Emir. Like, so even just based on your limited understanding of the Kvothe, that's not the only useful piece of information. That's way overstating it.
Yeah, that's the original reason why I made the note. It's like, dude, like everything he said to you, what he said about the mayor, what he said about Denna, like that's not useful. It's pretty useful. Trying to figure out who old patron is. I gave you some notes.
Yeah, with the walking stick, there's not a ton of information to kind of parse through as being able to figure out whether it's Braden or Cinder just from that little piece. The walking stick's a clue, kind of the motivations, the fact that, it's like a game, that see, how far I can go before she'll turn back. Mm-hmm. Which again, those kind of things could point towards Cinder or Braden. Both of those clues. I mean, the game sounds like Braden. The viciousness sounds like Cinder. The walking stick is something Braden's always carrying. Cinder just got shot through an arrow through the leg, although seems like that didn't have any kind of impact on him. I guess he could be suffering from it later on.
Did the Kvothe not mention that he's wearing a sick ass duster?
Did not. He's not Old Gray. He's definitely not Gray Delcinci.
Thought he said that. Well, no, but I thought Gray's influence. I mean, that's definitely going to make a. What's he's like? Keeps calling Cinder old Flippy. Eventually, Flippy's going to be like, "What do I got to do to impress this guy?" And start rocking a duster, probably. So.
Nah, Cinder wouldn't wear a duster. He's not cool enough.
He's wearing one of those like extra short cape. It's not even a cape. Like the jacket where it's just arms. I don't know if conductors. No, not conductors because those have tails. But it's basically where the back is all the way up the half of the back, but still has sleeves. That's what Cinder would wear. It's like a
Cinder
vest
would
with
be
sleeves.
Well tailored, like something tailored, meticulous fingernails, like everything. Like
it's like Lululemon. He's wearing a lot of Lululemon.
He's like he's got that psychopath like over abundance to being fastidious and clean and well dressed and properly groomed. Like has the same exact routine he goes through every single day in the morning.
I could see that, yeah. That's total psychotic, honed in focus. I could see that.
Yeah. Loves to play pranks too. Loves pranks. Vicious pranks.
Yeah,
like murder your family and like, gotcha. Gotcha. You got no more mom and dad, you fool.
Whatever happened to them? Weren't they just right there? Oh, the old switcheroo.
He's going around like killing parents, like April Fools. Like, how is this an April Fool's joke? You thought your parents were alive, but no, they're dead. Yeah. Gotcha.
You know the old switcheroo, right? You were just here and they were alive, and now you're back, they're dead. Switcheroo.
Yeah. Gotcha. What a prank. I'm such a prankster.
I'm incorrigible. I'm such a cut up.
Everybody, that's why everybody calls me the funny one of the group.
He just has a really bad sense of humor. Is that what this is?
When Cinder's out in the real world, he's going and doing like open mic nights. He's doing stand up comedy all the time, and he's just terrible at it. But he's not realizing he's terrible at it at all. He's not registering that nobody finds him funny. He's just being a complete psychopath everywhere he goes, but thinks he's hilarious.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then I feel like he'd kill his audience. You know, if it wasn't working, he'll literally kill them.
No, that's part of the prank. Ha ha! He starts chopping them up. Like, gotcha! April Fools!
It'd be like one of his jokes at the end of it. It'd be like, hey, all your families are dead.
Yeah, I killed all of them while you were here. Sent the Chandri and they went all to your houses. Took out everybody. Gotcha!
When you guys leave, you'll get the joke.
Don't forget to tip your waitresses.
You'll get home and you'll get the
Good
joke.
night. Drops the mic and walks off stage, clapping to himself, cheering himself. Me. But yeah, that's all I got on chapter 108.
Yep.
All right, so chapter 109, Barbarians and Madmen. In this chapter, Kvothe and Tempe make a long, mad dash towards Ademre and get in a lot of training.
I like this chapter a lot. Like, I like the whole, the regimented path that they take. I mean, I'm very much one of these people that I have to have like my shit planned out, especially if I have a task at hand that needs to be accomplished in a certain period of time, you know? And I particularly like exactly their approach. It's pretty great. And the fact that he goes through like exhaustive states within it and, you know, kind of gets his bearings throughout. And we get like another piece of like the different type of sleeping mind, right?
It's like once we get there, I'll talk about it. But yeah, it's similar towards Sleeping Mind, where Heart of Stone's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, he's like, truthfully, I wanted nothing more than to make my way back to Severin. I wanted to sleep in a bed and again take advantage of the mayor's favor while it was still fresh in his mind. I wanted to find Denna and make things right between us. But, you know, Tempe was in trouble, and then he's like, they already told me Denna had left, and, you know, she was obviously, it'd been a month, so he's like, she's not one to stick around to begin with. But yeah, and I like the fact when he's leaving, it's like giving his buys, telling them to go back and tell the mayor that he's not coming back for a while. I love the Dadan being like, you sure you don't want me to take him the box? Dadan asked for the 5th time. It's a little funny little part. Like, you need someone to take that money off your hands. I will give it to him. I promise.
Yeah, no. I can definitely be trusted. This is good.
I will not steal it. I do not have plans to run off to the free cities or whatever the small kingdoms and buy a bar and set up my own business. Don't have plans to do that. I haven't like priced out the lumber in my head or anything yet.
It's kind of funny. It's like I get, again, Rothfuss does a great job in these books of once we get comfortable in a particular area, a particular part of the world, we move on to another. But just that mention of the mayor's favor and Denna, it's like, oh yeah, I like forgot about these things.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I mean, since he's been with the mayor. I mean, it's, you know, you go a lot happens. It's not a long period of time,
so much
chapters wise, and as far as, you know, the amount of time it takes to get through these chapters, but there's a ton of stuff that happens in these chapters. You have the battle with the bandits, all the different stories, the Florian and the Kvothe, and, you know, all the little minor details, and then learning all about the different cast of characters and different environment. And so there's a lot packed into those little sections that makes it feel lived in by the time you leave.
I think that's definitely it. It's the content. It's the huge character arc he goes through within this period. We travel through it with him, and it's that richness of content that makes it feel like we've been here for so long, and he's gone through so much that it's like we've gone through it, So even thinking back to those things, it's like it feels like it happened to a different person to a degree.
Yeah, and then, he tells Daydan, he's like, after he won't give him the money, he's like, I told the mayor I'd give it to him personally. But then he's like, but I need you to give him this. I handed the big mercenary the letter I'd written the night before. He explains why I had to make you the leader of the group. I grinned. You might get a bonus out of it. Daydan puffed up importantly as he took hold of the letter. Standing nearby, Martin made a noise that could have been a cough. Like that aspect, just kind of the end of their group is another little jab at Daydan.
Yeah, he manipulates him like typical.
But and then, as Tempe and I traveled, I managed to coax a few details from the mercenary. Eventually, I learned it was customary for someone of his social standing to gain permission before he took a student of his own. And then on top of that, you're not supposed to teach a barbarian. And so, like, teaching Kvothe is a major problem. Not only should he not be teaching, but he definitely should not be teaching Kvothe. And so he's compounded his violation.
Yeah. I mean, and then was it here or was it before where he gets like really, where they get into the stakes of it, and he looks like, he could be, oh no, it's right up here, that he grows pale and looks like, the terrified individual.
Yeah, because it goes, will there be a trial of some sort? I asked. He shook his head. No trial. Shehyn will ask me questions. I will say I saw in Kvothe good iron waiting. He's of Lithani. He needs Lithani to guide him. And then Shehyn will ask you some questions. And if you answer right, we're good. If not, he's like, his hand made a circle, making a gesture for uneasy. What will happen if I'm not? I asked. For you, uncertainty. For me, I will be cut away. Cut away, I asked. And then he explains that he'll be, ostracized from the society. Completely cut away. And Kvothe's sitting there thinking, like, not killed then, but exiled. So that's not so bad. And then he looks at Tempe and sees that, no, this is worse than killing him. He'd rather be killed than to be cut away from everything he knows.
Yeah, the line, he was terrified, as frightened as anyone I had ever seen, is pretty chilling. So that really raises the stakes as to what he's putting through. I like the language of iron worth striking and iron in waiting. What was it? Iron in waiting? Yeah, good iron waiting. So it's like, moldable, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Like what he is up to this point is worth treating, so to speak. I mean, his introduction with Shehyn makes it seem like, that's, well, and again, Rothfuss, very judicious with the way he presents these things. He leaves us a bit abated, so we don't really know 100% certainly with 100% certainty, but it seems like he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, for sure. And then you get I had approximately 15 days to polish what I knew to a bright shine, the hope being that when I met Tempe's superiors, I could make a good impression. And he's like, the pace Tempe set was grueling. First, the two of us moved through the dancer's stretch I had watched many times before. Then, instead of the usual brisk walk, we ran for an hour. Then we performed the Kvothe, with Tempe correcting my endless mistakes. Then we walked a mile. Finally, we sat and discussed the Lithani. The fact these discussions were in Ademic did not make matter easier. But we agreed I should immerse myself in the language so on our restart I could speak as a civilized person. And so you getting like this, it's a grueling pace. Like they're working out, they're doing basically Pilates or yoga, and then they run, then they sit and talk, and then they just repeat this process over and over again, and they just keep working out over and over.
It seems like the Kvothe is a very intense. It's a little bit more intense than just like than what yoga would sound like to most people, because the way he describes it.
A lot of it is similar to like doing like planks, where you're just holding a position where it would be your muscles would be, it'd be a strenuous strain on your muscles, just the holding the positions and that kind of thing.
Well, and you're holding a position. Once we hear articulated how to do it correctly, you're holding a position in like a defensive posture, which means you're tightening that area through a natural posture, which ends up being quite grueling. So you put that on top of running, you put that on top of like the mental exhaustion of trying to like sort of like what he's trying to do with the Lithani takes a lot of effort. It sounds like, at least initially. Which again, I love the effectiveness of it, of exhausting him to figure out how to actually approach the Lithani in a much better way, much more effective way.
Yeah, I mean, it happens by accident. He's just mentally exhausted. And so, he stops thinking so much. He stops overthinking it. And then once the answers start coming from his gut, and I think that is purposeful by Rothfuss in the way these things are explained. And I think it comes up pretty well. I'll talk about it when we get to Shehyn. But I think that it's purposeful. The reason it's described the way it is. But when he first starts talking about it, he's not doing as well, because he's like, what is the purpose of the Lithani? Tempe asked. To give us a path to follow. I replied, no, Tempe said sternly. The Lithani is not a path. What is the purpose of the Lithani, Tempe? To guide us in our actions. By following the Lithani, you act rightly. Is this not a path? No, the Lithani is what helps us choose a path. And, then they would start over. Run an hour, perform the Kvothe, walk a mile, discuss the Lithani. It took about 2 hours, and after our brief discussions was finished, we'd begin again. So it's just over and over doing this. It should be a grind.
Yeah, well, and what I like so much about that approach to the Lithani, to that, especially for Kvothe, man, he's a guy that needs to know the formula, the solution, right? He needs A, B, C, he needs the whole thing to equal how you got there. Like, that's basically how his mind works. He's not good at accepting abstract thought in a lot of these types of things, right? He's very formulaic, I would say.
Yeah, so, and it also too, like, I mean, he explains to him, like, when we're talking about the Lithani, we don't use the hand talk, because it's not a, you make none of this. His left hand moved quickly through excitement, negation, several gestures I didn't recognize. So when you speak of the Lithani, it should not come from here. He tapped on my head, or here. He tapped on my chest over my heart and ran his fingers down my left side to my left hand. True knowing of the Lithani lives deeper, lives here. He prodded me in the stomach below my navel. You must speak from here without thinking. It's like your gut, your just instinct, which is a very sleeping mind type of level, is where you're supposed to be getting this. Like same, like you're getting these answers from the same place that you get naming.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's like it's from the gut, and it's not trying so hard. It's kind of the analogy that comes to mind a lot is like where Kvothe, grabbing tits, right? It's like he's like gripping his hand as hard as he can to try to figure these things out, where it's like, dude, just let go and like allow. It's kind of like that. It's almost like a law of allowing. That's why I joke about it as the chi, where you just sort of like chill out and allow the awareness to wash over you, right? See the wind, that type of shit.
Well, and it's a impossible thing to explain. Like, I mean, no one can explain it to him. So it's not something that's just easy. Like, you just do this. You do, like when he's like, it comes from here, it comes from the gut. It's like, what does that mean though? Like, I don't, they can't explain it. So it's just like, it's this indescribable type of thing that you're supposed to have to do. And the only way you're able to really do it, it seems, is that you do it by accident. Same way, like, Alodin talks about, like, you're not the first one who's called his first name in a fit of anger. He's like, I called the name of the wind for the first time when Master Dahl wouldn't teach me one of the sympathetic bindings. He's like, so he called the name of the wind in a fit of anger as well. So it's, it doesn't seem like these are things that are easily discovered. It's like you stumble upon them, and then it's through that kind of discovery process that you start to get a grasp of how to do it. With Kvothe, it's even more subconscious. He doesn't even understand that what he's doing, like the spinning leaf, like when he starts that, he doesn't even understand that is that's the process. That's what helps you do it. Like this is like you're opening up the window into your sleeping mind, and that's giving you the ability to find these answers. You just don't realize that's what you're doing. You think it's meaningless, and you're giving nonsense answers, and they like nonsense, but it's like, no, you're not. It's subtler than that. It's you're speaking from the place that you are reaching that deeper spot. It's just so hard to do that when you're doing it, you don't even realize you're doing it.
It's a really funny payoff. It's a fantastic payoff when he's like, he thinks he's cheating.
Yeah.
He thinks he doesn't know anything, and he thinks he has like a cheat code because he's using spinning leaf. It's like that. You're not cheating if you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
No matter how you got there, you're doing it. So keep fucking doing it, man. Keep cheating.
Yeah.
Apparently.
That's what he said. And like Tempe's telling him, it's like, it doesn't come from your head, doesn't come from your heart. And he's like, I'm getting these answers, but they're not coming from my head and they're not coming from my heart. I'm cheating. It's like, that's exactly, I just fucking told you. You're not getting the answers from there.
Well, and I love completely different approaches, right? What Tempe's doing versus what Elodin's doing, completely different approaches to it. But then also he gets there through absolute exhaustion as well. So it's like he gets there through literally his body not giving him a choice, which is pretty great. Because again, it's one of those things. I think it's tremendous. I mean, one of the really cool things that Rothfuss does in these chapters is this idea of something that really can't be explained, and it's always, it's like whatever you make it sort of situation. But there's confidence in what Shehyn thinks it is, and what Tempe thinks it is, and what Kvothe can have confidence in, like the way he's approaching the answers to the questions, right? It's looking at things more broadly. I love the Ademic approach also of like just saying beautiful.
But it's similar, like Shehyn discovering and seeing potential in him. Tempe seeing potential in him is similar to Elodin seeing naming potential in him, or Fella, or any of these people. Mm-hmm. It seems like if you're at that level and you understand it and you're capable of it, even though you can't teach it and you can't like describe it and vocalize exactly what it is to make it something that is easily comprehensible. But if you're capable of it, you can see it in others, and you can know if they, have that potential, or they get it or not. It's like when you know it, if you're already at that level. But yeah, it's something you can't really describe. So you just kind of got to talk around it.
It makes me like Elodin more, that he's like, you're too short.
Yeah.
Your eyes are too green. Whatever the hell he was saying, whatever, you're too tall, you're too short.
Anything will get you away from me. Yeah.
Yeah. Just get
this is an impossible task. You don't even know what you're asking me. But yeah, and then so he's like, you're not supposed to give a thoughtful answer. You were supposed to give an earnest one. If you truly understood the Luthani, that knowing would become obvious in your answers. And then it's run, Katan, walk, discuss. We completed the cycle 3 times before our midday break, 6 hours. I was covered in sweat and half convinced I would die. After an hour of to rest and eat, we were off again. We finished another 3 cycles before we stopped for the night. And then in the middle of the night, Tempe wakes him up, makes him do the Katan again, drink water, get a little, his muscles moving, try to work that out so he doesn't just sleep for 8 hours straight and without moving. Mm-hmm. And get the muscles moving a little bit. And then
that was great. That was a nice coach, right? He did a good coach move. Like, get a bunch of water in you, do a stretch, and then pass the fuck out. Let your body heal.
Yeah, it'd be, I don't know if I would take it very well. Like, if I was that exhausted, like, even if I knew you were right, I'd still would be like, dude, get the fuck away from me. But yeah, and then the second day was worse. Even strapped tightly to my back, my loop became a miserable burden. And he's like, the sword and the lockbox, he's like, all these things are just grating on me at this point. Everything is getting hard. And He's like, in the moments when Tempe and I spoke of the Lethani were the only real rest, but they were disappointingly brief. It's like my mind spun with exhaustion and took all my concentration to pull my thoughts into order, trying to give proper answers. Even so, my responses only irritated him. Time after time, he shook his head, explaining how I was wrong. And that's part of the problem is, like, he's like, the answers don't come from, thoughtfulness. And Kvothe is like, it's like, it took all my concentration to pull all my thoughts in order. And he's like, that's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. Stop trying to put all your thoughts in order. Yeah, it's like, again, it's got to come, from the gut. It's instinct and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a load and stop grabbing my tits. Same thing, I mean, virtually.
And then you get, eventually I gave up trying to be right. Too weary to care, I quit pulling my exhausted thoughts into order and simply enjoyed sitting down for a few minutes. I was too wary to remember what I said half the time, but surprisingly, Tempe found those answers more to his liking. It was a blessing. When my answers pleased him, our discussions lasted longer, and I could spend more time resting. And then, starts getting a little bit better the third day. It's like his head felt clear and light, like a leaf floating on the wind. In this frame of mind, answers to Tempe's questions tripped easily off the tip of my tongue, simple as singing. And that's like, is just accidentally discovering spinning leaf. And then it was run, Katan, walk, discuss, 3 cycles. Then as we moved through the Katan on the side of the road, I collapsed.
I wonder, though, I just wanted to mention, simple as singing. I wonder if there's some implication there, because you've talked about before about how there's magic in his singing, like tapping into that sleeping mind, simple as singing. Well, singing's not simple for most people. Most people, they got to sing to people. They're fucking nervous as shit, or don't know what the hell to sing about,
Yeah, 100%. I think, that there's likely magical ability to his magic. And I think that spinning leaf it's like the way kind of I visualize spinning leaf is like it's given him a window to the sleeping mind without letting the sleeping mind kind of take over and just be in control. But he opens up a window to it where he's able to kind of access that instinctual gut side of things, where it makes it easier to spot the name of the wind or these kind of things because he's got a window open to that avenue. And so it opens things up for him a little bit. He's not closed off to it, but he's not so open to it that it's consumed him and it's running the show. But it's like gives him like a little bit of a open window to it where he has more control. And so I think that helps him take that next step from where the times he discovers it, it just completely takes over, and he's got really not much control on when it starts it, when it shuts off, like against Ambrose or against Florian.
Yeah,
he didn't really. It wasn't like go and stop. It just happened and then it ended, and he didn't really have much to say in the matter.
Well, and especially with Florian, he had complete control, right? And then once it ended, he didn't have any control.
Yeah, and well, in the midst of it, when he's doing it, he has control. Like the sleeping mind has the magical control, but the starting it and stopping it, he doesn't have that kind of control. Whereas, like, seems like spinning leaf gives him an access to that sleeping mind without allowing it to kind of overwhelm him, and where he has the ability to kind of start it and stop it. He starts because he takes the next step after spinning leaf. After this, that's when he starts taking the next step and starts to see the name of the wind, and then kind of start to be able to call it on command and see it more consistently. And it's a softer touch, and it's a less visceral reaction or situation. Well,
it's completely different than when he used it with Ambrose, right? Because he had zero control. It happened in a flash, and not only could he not stop it, Kilvin had to help him.
Yeah.
And it reeled him out of reality.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It seems like he's just completely out of control in those environments, whereas this one seems like more of a controlled access to that ability. And I think that's why he's able to kind of take that next step. But
it's pretty great. I mean, we talk about magic systems. I mean, talk about earning it. Right? I mean, he really earns, it takes all of 2 books to get to the point where it's like he seems to actually start to have some control over this. So given whatever he does in future books, I mean, that definitely is 100% earned.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, he builds it out. Like, it's a slow process for Kvothe to become semi-competent in naming. And
it's built on so much.
The sympathy, I mean, it takes him a while before he gets to the level that he gets against the bandits. It's a process. Like, I mean, there's the classes with Fenton, his battle with Devi, and those kind of things, and the when he had to have his defenses up to defend against Ambrose for however long that was while he was building the Graham, and Ambrose kept attacking him with the Mamet. Like, he had to strengthen his alar during those moments. So it's earned. Like, his increase in ability and sympathy, it's earned through classes, through practice, through the alar, the happenstance of Ambrose getting the Mamet and those kind of things. Like, it built it out. Same thing with the naming. It's a long, steady process. Same thing with his building the bloodless and those kind of things. He went through the classes and the grinded. It's like, it's all earned.
Well, that's one of the things I love about what we're about to read so much in Ademre is that he goes back to square one, basically.
Yeah.
And he has to earn all that. Like, he has to build from, again, basically ground zero. He leaves everything else behind, basically all of his abilities. And then he's able to access them in the moment when it fits, when it's natural. Right?
Yeah.
With the tree. So it's great. I mean, not only is it all earned, it's built up in a multifaceted way. I mean, like the idea of this, where he gets into a complete exhaustion and is forced to let go. He doesn't have a choice, and then it clicks in his mind though. So I love it because the progression to the point where he like pushes himself to get back to where he once was, and then almost kills himself, basically.
Yeah,
or knocks himself out. But that clicks in his mind to what he was able to achieve. And then that's the window you were talking about. He kind of gains access to that window.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and then so he passes out, and then Tempe's, impressed by it and the fact that he didn't complain. He just kept mind over matter type of thing, where he didn't let, his body stop him. He just kept pushing forward. But then Tempe's like, that's of the Lethani, pushing, making your mind having control over your body and not being your body not having control over your mind. But he's like, also knowing your limits is also of the Lethani. You shouldn't push yourself until you pass out. Like, but it's, so it's kind of good and bad. But then he's like, Kvothe goes, unless falling is what the Lethani requires, I said without thinking. My head still felt light as a wind-blown leaf. He gave a rare smile. Yes, you are beginning to see. So it's that spinning leaf he's beginning to gain access to.
I love like that, but that comment though is like for us to read. It's like, well, what? So I mean, you could just say that about anything.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, but I like that nuance to it. I like that it's. I mean, it's funny because it pushes a comedic relief sort of area while also still being something that if you take it seriously, it does push in the direction that they're suggesting, which is
well, I mean, I think that's, that does give further clarity on what the Lethani actually is that it's not about like doing X is always right.
It's not 10 Commandments.
There's context matters. Like sometimes doing X is right, sometimes doing X is wrong. Whether you do it or not, is the Lethani is what is telling you whether to do it or not do it. When is the right time? Depends. So, if it's the right time, it's the Lethani. If it's the wrong time and you do it, then it's not a the Lethani. So it's, it's about when is it right and when it's wrong. And it's your ability to determine that. But with the Lethani, it's not like it's not a set in stone type of thing where this is always the right. I mean, the right way is always the right way, but that doesn't mean that doing X is always either right or wrong. Doing X could be right or wrong depending on the situation surrounding it.
Yeah. It's one of those things you can't really explain it. And that's what we get is that you can't really wholly explain it, that's kind of the point. Like the idea of 10 commandments or the golden rule. There isn't a golden rule. There's a golden rule, and you know it when you see it, sort of situation. It's one of those things like you know it when you feel it. So I just follow your gut.
But yeah, and then so Kvothe goes, I returned his smile. Your A turn is coming very well, Tempe. Tempe blinked worry. We are speaking my language, not yours. I'm not speaking. I started to protest, but as I did, I listened to the words I was using. Skiopateas. My head reeled for a moment. And so skio likely means speaker, which aligns with skiop and scarpy, as he is a speaker. He's a storyteller, and he's a storyteller. As skiop, he blows the nips off the roo with his story, and then Scarpy is blowing the nips off of the little kids, and
I was gonna say,
orphan kids. Life's bad enough for those orphan kids, and he's sitting there making them all nipless.
I mean, he blew the nips off of Kvothe and opened his door. I mean, that's pretty freaking huge, man. Or not open his door, but woke him up.
Yeah, blew his nips off and blew the doors off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, behind the doors asleep. Doors are forgetting.
Yeah.
Nips and doors, blowing them all off.
Yeah, that's quite a skill to have. It's like Artemis and the name of the wind combined.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he's like, am I speaking well then? I said to distract myself from my thirst. You're speaking well for a child. Very well for a barbarian. Only well? Am I making the words wrong? It's like, you touch eyes too much. He widened his eyes and stared, pointing into my own, unblinking. Also, your words are good, but simple. Reminds me of the Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
I'd like a Big Mac and large fry.
Every time. Yeah. So funny. Like, pulls his eyes open.
It's classic stand-up.
There should be more bits like that. It's so funny. But yeah, it's really funny.
But yeah, and then he's like, you must teach me more words then. And it's like, no, you know too many. And this one, he's like, describes that with their language, it's not about explaining things and being exact and precise. It's about saying a lot with a little, as little as possible.
Precise with less.
Well, it's not being precise at all. It's like his writing, whereas like there's so many different ways to interpret it. And so like when you say beautiful and then you let the other person determine what that means to them, that's not precise. That's being very, very loose and allowing the other person to think about the thing and then make their own interpretations. About like his writing style is very much about implications, a lot of implications, giving the reader a lot of opportunity to make their own conclusions and their own thoughts and their own opinions. He's not telling you what to think. He's not being precise and saying, I put this here for this reason, and I want you to think this. He just says this little thing and then lets you fill in the rest, and you're going to get a million different interpretations off of that based on your experiences, what you like, what you prefer, and those kind of things are all going to change how you view, what he's written. And so it's a very similar thing to that, where it's, giving the other person's opportunity to kind of think through their own thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great exercise when just asking a group of people that have read the books, like, what does Denna look like? How would you cast this fella? And it's just like someone completely different than what you're thinking, Yeah, it's pretty great. It says a lot about your taste, your own individual taste,
Yeah, because there's not a lot of description. So yeah, he writes everything in a vague way, and that's kind of what they talk about. Like he's like, so when I meet a woman, I should simply say you are beautiful. Tempe shook his head. No, you would simply say beautiful, and let the woman decide the rest of what you mean. It's like, isn't that, I don't know a word for vague or unspecific, and I had to start again to get my point across. Doesn't that lead to confusion? It leads to thoughtfulness, he said firmly. Is delicate. That should always be the concern when one is speaking. To be too much talking, he shook his head, disapproval. It is, he stalled, searching for a word. And then he's like, rude? No, negation, frustration. I go to Severin and there are people who stink. There are people who do not. Both are people, but those who do not stink are people of quality. And he's like, you are my student. You need to be a person of quality. So say fewer words.
I love that response doesn't that lead to confusion? It leads to thoughtfulness. It's just fucking tremendous, man. It is delicate. That should always be the concern when speaking, is to be thoughtful of what you're saying and the impression you're giving when you say what you say. Right? It's. I mean, no wonder there's so much space between their words, because they're considering how to phrase it, considering how to present it.
It's similar to like when Elodin is talking about naming and the way he tries to teach it, where he's giving you questions and allowing your mind to go to work with the questions and to worry at them and try to figure them out and to think things through. And so you're not trying to give people answers, you're trying to give people puzzles. And then through the working through the puzzles, it strengthens their mind. And so it's basically like you're giving them the gift of the ability to contemplate what you say rather than just telling them what you mean. You give them the opportunity to contemplate and think about and try to figure out what you mean. Which is very much what Rothfuss does in this story. I mean, he's writing about what he's writing about.
Yeah. Yeah, he's creating, I mean, overall there's an objective, there's a character arc, but within that there's all those additional puzzles that lead to what we don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
That we get to connect and everything else.
Yeah, and I mean, there's going to be a ton of things that he's not going to give an answer to. He's not going to tell you this is the answer.
That's upsetting.
There's people that asked him like, clarifying questions about the Lithania, or someone's asked him like, can you explain anger more? And he's like, I did. He's like, I explained it. It's in the book. It's just very hard to understand. But that's going to be his answer, is like, it's in there. He's like, that's, it's something you have to think on. It's not something that I can just, there are concepts and things and ideas that he's put in the book that don't have a definitive, here's the answer, here's how it exactly works. It's a more complex system than that. I mean, intentionally, he's creating it himself. He's creating something that can't be explained. And that's kind of the purpose, is for you to think about it and try to figure it out yourself.
Well, and that's life in itself as well. Those are the bigger themes that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle write about, is, how we conceive or how we perceive of what life is. What is the meaning of life? Things of that nature, those bigger questions, you trip out on them. And you
they all kind of insist on themselves.
No, but I mean, in actuality, that's some of the beauty of what he's doing here is, I love that idea of art of saying many things in one thing. We did skip over something that I did want to mention though. When he's speaking Ademic, like fluently, it did seem to me to some degree he's kind of like accessing something. You know what I mean? It's almost like, so he was in exhaustion, right? But he's speaking Ademic like fluently, right? And he's thinking that he's not, he's speaking, Ademic, and he's thinking he's speaking Tauran, and he's thinking that, or he's just, I guess he's exhausted, so maybe I'm taking it too far, but
and he's accessing Spinning Leaf in that moment, and so again, like I said, it's kind of a doorway to the sleeping mind. So similar, like when Elodin says. Or not Elodin, when Exodal calls the name of fire, he hears fire, and he's like, that's not actually what I said, but his sleeping mind translated it for him. So when he hears Tempe speaking, and he's like, your turn is getting good, and this is at a point when he's exhausted, and he's kind of accessing that sleeping mind through Spinning Leaf. It's interpreting the words for him and translating them for him. So that's kind of how I envision this thing. Like, and you see this too. It's going to come up a lot in these chapters when he's like accessing Spinning Leaf. It seems to be a door, like a window to the sleeping mind, and it comes up a real clear example is when he's with Shehyn. But he goes, but what? And then he goes, but what about clarity? What if you were building a bridge? There are many pieces to that. All of them must be said clearly. Of course, Tempe said, agreement. Sometimes, but in most things, important things, delicate is better, small is better. And then the remainder of the day was spent in recovery. We would walk a few miles, perform the K-10, discuss the Lothani, then walk again. We stopped at a roadside inn that evening where I ate enough for 3 men and fell into bed before the sun had left the sky. And then, like, the next day, they're back at it again, but only 2 before midday and 2 after. It's like my body burned and ached, but I was no longer delirious with exhaustion. Fortunately, with a little mental effort, I could slide back into that strange anticipatory clear-headedness I'd used to answer Tempe's questions the day before. So through this process, he's I think this is, like I said, he's building a doorway or a window to the sleeping mind. And I think that's what the spinning leaf is creating for him. It's like over the next couple of days, I came to think of that odd mental state as spinning leaf. And he's like, it seemed like a distant cousin to Heart of Stone, the mental exercise I learned long ago. That said, there was little similarity between the two. Heart of Stone was practical. It stripped away emotion and focused my mind. It made it easier to break my mind into separate pieces or maintain the all-important alar, which I think is important because you see that when he's in the Fae against Felurian and he drops himself into the Heart of Stone, he's able to protect himself against Felurian's attacks and protect himself against her power. And he splits his mind and he's got all that and he's able to think through things analytically, but it's not until he lets go of that side that he's able to kind of play his music. And then when he's playing his music, he starts to let it go a little bit more. And then once he's let kind of that go, when she attacks him, his sleeping mind has access to, take the lead at that point because he's pushed off the Heart of Stone and gave the sleeping mind a way out. But I think the Heart of Stone and the sleeping mind are in like opposition to each other.
Yeah, it's like he kind of released the burden, right? Because he was occupying his mind with other things. So he wasn't tightening everything into Heart of Stone.
It's like Heart of Stone like completely shuts off the sleeping mind and spinning leaf opens a window to it, is what it seems.
I like the comparison. It's helpful because how do you explain these things, right? To see these different like utilities of mind. But I like it. I like the spinning leaf.
And he describes it. He says, on the other hand, spinning leaf seemed largely useless. It was relaxing to let my mind grow clear and empty, then float and tumble lightly from one thing to the next, but aside from helping me draw answers to Tempe's questions out of thin air, seemed to have no practical value. It was a mental equivalent of a card trick. She just doesn't understand what he's actually doing because he starts to utilize it. And, it gets down to the end of the book when Elodin's like, could you call the name of the wind if you needed it? And he slips his mind into spinning leaf, but he's not able to see it. And he's like, not exactly. He's like, not on command, but if I needed it, I could probably do it. But, he starts utilizing spinning leaf for naming. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it kind of speaks to that same irony I was mentioning before where he got all these things from the Kvothe and he's like, oh, I only got one piece of usefulness from it. It's like with spinning leaf, he just underrates, the utility of what he's able to accomplish. He doesn't appreciate it in live time, or at least initially. But he comes to realize how much more useful it can be. Which, I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, we sat there with him in Elodin's classes where he's just like so fucking pissed. Teach me, he's yelling at him for him to teach him, and it's like, fucking doing it, man. Just stop. Just allow it.
At least like Tempe tries to explain it to him, or Shehyn tries to explain it to him, and Bichette, like Elodin is just like, boo, boo, boo.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, what you sound like an insane person.
It's all right here. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't give him, he doesn't, well, and he gets it later, right? Just took, it was a slow burn.
But and then so Tempe starts teaching him how to fight, and then he's asking him, why did you smile when we fought today? It's like, because I was happy. Did you enjoy the fighting? Yes, Tempe radiated displeasure. That is not of the Lothani. This should have been his warning. for when he's talking to Bichette about like fighting, and he pisses her off when he's sitting there talking about like his need for, and then she just starts slapping the shit out of him, beats the living crap out of him for, he's like, I need to learn how to, fight with a sword. And then she's, and she's like, why, what do you need a sword for? He's like, to use it. And she's like, oh yeah?
You can't defend yourself with your fucking fists.
Well, it's not only that, it's like, that's not the purpose of the sword. It's not to use it to fight with. And I'm not teaching you this so you can go out in the world and kill people. It's like, that's not why we do this. We're not psychopaths training to be, killers. This is something different. But yeah, and so like, again, he's like, did you enjoy the fighting? Yes. Tempe rated. That is not of the Lethani. I thought for a moment on my next question. Should a man take pleasure in the fight? No. You take pleasure in acting rightly and following the Lethani. And he's like, what if the following the Lethani requires me to fight? Should I take no pleasure in it? No. You should take pleasure in following the Lethani. If you fight well, you should take pride in doing a thing well. But for the fighting itself, you should only feel duty and sorrow. Only barbarians and madmen take pleasure in combat. Whoever loves the fight itself has left the Lethani behind. So he has this explained to him before he goes into Ademre. And it doesn't sink in at all because he puts his foot in his mouth with Bichette, and she beats the living shit out of him for saying these kind of things and making her feel like she's teaching him extremely dangerous things, and then she's going to put him out in the world and he's going to utilize them to do bad shit because I like to fight. Yeah, so he doesn't learn from what Tempe tells him here. Takes an ass whooping for it to kind of sink in.
It does. I mean, when he first introduced it hits with confusion, right? When he's like, "Did you enjoy the fighting?" Yes. And then when he hits him with "That is not of the Lethani," and then how he comes at him, I remember it's like when I read it, it's like it hits with like, "Wait, what?" Like it's surprising.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense because you would think of it in the term of like it's the to kill is not a good thing, but it might per se it's not a good thing, but in a situation if someone is trying to like kill you and your family, you might have to do it, and the killing part is regrettable, but it might be of the Lethani to do it to save people and to protect your family and yourself. That's within the Lethani, but it's regrettable that you were put in a situation where you have to do that. It shouldn't be a situation where you kill someone and you're like, fuck yeah, whoa, well, adrenaline.
I think what it all comes from, what it's all fueled with, is they wear these red outfits and they're really good in battle and hand-to-hand combat, and you watch them do it and you're like, well, fuck, I want to do that shit. Yeah. So they come into it with a completely different, perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's showing that this is not a group that, takes pleasure in being mercenaries and killing and fighting. It's not about that for them. They're trying to do what's right, and they're trying to do what's right by their people. And sometimes fighting is what is right. And so, but they do have a nuanced perspective on the matter so that they're not going out into the world just trying to kill and conquer and just, they're bloodthirsty maniacs. They're not like that. And that's what separates them from like Tam, that mercenary in the bar who's just itching for a fight. He's just looking to start a fight with someone. Tempe's willing to fight him, and he's willing to fucking whoop his ass, but he's not looking for a fight.
So they're not Cobra Kai, is what you're saying?
No, they're more Daniel LaRusso's Miyagi-Do.
Yeah, Miyagi, whatever. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, and then on the 11th day, Tempe showed me how to incorporate my sword into the Katan. The first thing I learned was how quickly a sword becomes lead heavy when held at arm's length. So we ran, and I learned, and heart drew ever closer.
Yeah, I kept training, right?
Yep.
They kept their schedule, cycles and cycles and cycles.
And then we get 110, Beauty and Branch, and this is they arrive at Hart, and he meets Shehyn. He's like, as we traveled, we moved quickly through town, stopping only for food and water. The countryside was a blur. My mind was focused on the Katan, the Lethani, and the language I was learning. We finished the trip in 15 days. At my best guess, we covered almost 300 miles in that time. So 15 days, 300 miles, that's like 250 miles a day that they were traveling.
It's 20 miles a day.
No, it's like 250.
That's like 20 miles a day.
No, you don't understand math. They went 300 miles in 15 days. That's at least 250 miles a day.
Okay. I mean, 20 miles a day is a pretty good pace. 250 is ridiculous.
Yeah, and they were going at a ridiculous pace. That just shows you how crazy what they did is.
Yeah.
But yes. But yeah, so they were booking it. They were booking it. That's like they're basically running a marathon every day.
I mean, that's one of the things. Like, it's funny because a lot of times, I guess, once we meet everybody else and we start to see Tempe's kind of like low on the totem pole, I start to think less of him. But then when I get back to this, it's like, man, he does a really good job of preparing Kvothe. Like this, first of all, to get there as quickly as they did, that's quite efficient. But then to also be able to load that with their cycles that they're doing, where it's the Khaytan, speak of the Lethani, and then either run or walk or whatever. I mean, he's getting him physically and mentally ready, and preparing with language and all that other stuff, and yeah, it works quite well.
Yeah, I mean that's a grueling pace. Like he almost close to a marathon a day for 15 straight days. That's
you can do it.
Brutal. And not only that, you're covering that time, but you're stopping and working out in between. So you're running that, but also you're doing workouts and hard workouts. So it's a grueling pace. I would not be a fan of that. I would not want to walk 20 miles a day for 15 straight days, much less run them, work out, stop, talk, run, work out, stop and talk. Just doing that over and over again.
I think not only should you do it, I think you should start a boot camp where this is what you do. You do these cycles. Yeah. It's the Ademic cycles is what it's called.
Just run across the country.
And you speak
do like Forrest Gump.
And you speak of the Lethani. And
we'll call it Tempe's Gump.
But Tempe's Gump. Ugh. Oh, a terrible name. I mean, it's all he did was run, and not even really well. Anyway,
yeah, that's why Tempe's involved. Like, it can't just be Forrest Gump. It's Tempe's Gump.
Yeah, no, I got it. Yeah. Great work. But you're also including the Khaytan. You're including some yoga work, and you're so a lot of stretching. Keep your limber. Keep your muscles loose as can be. And then also doing some meditation, So I think you would come out of this much better than when you started. Oh, definitely would have to be better than you.
I 100% agree with you that I would dominate it. Like I would have like the coolest Khaytan movements. Like I would make my own Khaytan and it would be amazing. And then I'd have great philosophical discussions in between the running. You're saying, and so I 100% agree with you that I'd be an amazing drill instructor at Tempe's Gump.
Again, that can't be the name. That's too absurd.
That is an amazing name. Sticks in your mind. It just burrows in there.
Ademic cycle. Yeah, I don't like that much either, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I figured it out. It's Tempe's Gump.
TG 45.
But then 15, he was like, Hart was the first Adem town I'd ever seen, and to my inexperienced eye, it hardly seemed a town at all. But I love how much with the Adem, everything he sees and his initial inspection of any aspect of the Adem is missing all the nuance. He's always missing the nuance and misunderstanding what's going on. Like with the hand talk and the not looking in the eyes and all the different things of their culture and their personalities he's misunderstanding. And then when he gets to the town, he's like, "This isn't a fucking town." He's missing that. No, everything is just built into the mountainside because they're right by where these crazy winds are. So you can't just have houses out in the middle of where the winds are whipping through, throwing shit. You got to kind of build shit inside into the mountain to be able to protect against that. But it's just a continuation of his initial thoughts, his initial things that he thinks about the Adem, are off. He's looking at things on the surface, and he's not seeing the hidden depth and what they're doing and why they do the things that they do. But the more time he spends with them, the more he learns about their culture and the better he understands it. It's written in a interesting way, and that the more time you spend with Kvothe, with Adem, the more time you see how rich their culture is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rhyme to the reason, right? When we get the 99 stories and everything else, and why they've lived the way they have, how they were sort of nomadic initially before they found a place. It all makes sense. I mean, and it is very different than other societies, other cultures. But it's really funny too, man, because this would be 100% one of those situations where everyone else, if they knew the way they lived, they'd be like, man, they're savages. And exactly the opposite in the other direction. They look at everyone else as savages for the way that they live and the way that they communicate. It's really, it's and genius,
a lot of
man.
A lot of the, and you get the aspect of like people who have not been out in the world, like Pentha. They have a misconstrued, misguided view of how Kvothe and his people are, and to the point. I mean, they it doesn't even seem like the distinction between like the Rue and Daydan, like Kvothe and Daydan. They're both like that's a group, even though they couldn't be further apart in who they are, and their personalities and everything. Like, but you guys are the barbarians, and we're the civilized people, and so even they, because they're not around that culture, they also have a misguided view and a misunderstanding of what they don't see the nuance in the other cultures.
I mean, and that's so true to our world. I mean, it's exactly how people do it.
Yeah,
they just.
That's why both sides look at the other side as the barbarians.
Yeah. Yeah, always. I mean, even within our own societies, there's always that splitting of groups. It's that tribe dynamic that's like in our DNA at this point.
And nobody realizes my tribe is the best tribe.
Yeah, I guess everybody's missing that one.
Yeah. But yeah, and then it felt odd, and then Tempe heads off. He tells him to wait, and then he goes and heads in to see what his punishment's going to be. He's both standing outside. He's like, it felt oddly peaceful here, with none of the clamor and stink of a larger town. No clatter of the hooves on cobblestones. No cart vendors singing out their wares. I couldn't imagine someone like Tempe. I could imagine someone like Tempe growing up in a place like this, soaking in the quiet until he was full of it, then taking it with him when he left.
I like that.
Yeah, because it matches his personality. The subtleness of their town and the mutedness of their town is similar to his personality as well.
Well, it also, when you consider that and how it's like it defines who he is as a person, if he loses that, man, that's a big blow, to say the least. If that defines your identity, or helps define your identity, and you lose that, then what? Then what the hell are you?
Yeah. And then there might be something here with little else to look at. I turned to the nearby building. It was made from uneven pieces of stone pieced together like a jigsaw. Looking closer, I was puzzled by the lack of mortar. I tapped it with a knuckle, wondering briefly if it might be a single piece of stone carved to look like many stones fit together. So I don't know what that could be, but it's weird that it's put in there, and then nothing else is mentioned of it after that.
Yeah, they just talk about, she mentions, oh, you like our wall? And then they talk about a wall. Yeah, that's a good point. The fact that it looks like there's a seam, but there is no seam. What's the wording?
He says, looking closer, I was puzzled by the lack of mortar. I tapped it with a knuckle, wondering briefly if it might be a single piece of stone carved to look like many stones to fit together.
Yeah, it kind of sounds to me like the 4-plate door in a way.
Except for that, doesn't. It's completely flat. This is like built where it seems like it looks like a jigsaw puzzle, but it's all.
But there's no
looks
mortar.
Like one piece.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the fact that there's no mortar, or that when I hear one piece, that makes me think of Greystone as well, but it doesn't mention gray.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything there or not, but it stands out just the way it's described. Yeah. But it could just be, it's a cool design that the, Kvothe just doesn't ask any questions about, so we don't get any explanation for what exactly was up there. But it could just be like, their artistic side. But then he's like, behind me, I heard a voice saying Ademre, what do you think of our wall? I turned to see an older woman with the characteristic pale gray eyes of the Adem. Is it fascinating, our wall? She asked, gesturing general amusement, curiosity with one hand. What do you think of it? I think it is beautiful, I responded in Ademic, careful to make only brief eye contact, her hand tilted in an unfamiliar gesture. Beautiful? Gave her the bare shrugs. There's beauty that belongs to simple things of function. Perhaps you are mistaking a word, she said. Gentle apology. Beauty is a flower or a woman or a gem. Perhaps you mean to say utility. A wall is useful. Useful, but beautiful as well. Perhaps a thing gains beauty being used. Perhaps a thing is used according to its beauty, I countered, wondering if this was the Adem equivalent of small talk. If it was, I preferred it to the insipid gossip of the mayor's court, which I love that. Little thing is like this. I love this pedantic, semantic discussion we're having. Like Kvothe is 100% that guy, and it fits much better with the, than the, did you see what so-and-so did? He's like, he's not interested in that. Now, if it was a story about him, if it was gossip about him, 100% into that.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. It's like a kind of like a word puzzle, a logic puzzle, and that's 100% his world.
Yeah. But he hates poetry. He hates poetry. He just loves discussing everything in this artful, poetic way.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. Yeah, again, like we talked about before, that's all just because his dad hated poetry, but it's just he's in denial of who he is as a person.
Exactly. Then I like the part where she's like, "What of my hat?" she asked, touching it with a hand. "Is it beautiful when it is used?" It was slightly lopsided, and the stitching was uneven in places. "Seems very warm," I said carefully. She gestured small amusement, and her eyes twinkled ever so slightly. "It is that," she said, "and to me it is beautiful, as it was made for me by my daughter's daughter. Then it is beautiful as well." Agreement. I love that. He's like, that. He's like, that is fucking janky. That is a dumbass looking hat. She's like, my granddaughter made me this hat. He's like, oh, okay. Well, then it's okay.
I have trouble visualizing it. Like, I just look at it as a stocking cap, and then I'm like, if it's lopsided, that's.
I picture a hat. I just think of a hat that, like a stocking cap that a 6-year-old would make, and then that is what she's wearing to me, where it would look ridiculous. It's like, maybe like the teacher like helps her, so it's at least in somewhat the shape of it functions as a stocking cap, but it's a 6-year-old's version of it. So like the stitching's off and everything about it is like that stocking cap looks a little janky.
Yeah, it looks like shit. That would have been funny if he just came out with complete honesty for this. That looks like garbage. Did a child make it? Oh, yeah. A child did make it. Well, then I guess it's beautiful, but it's a piece of shit.
I would just like to say, now that I know your granddaughter made it, tell her, don't quit your day job.
You should be playing an instrument.
Yeah, maybe she should pick up an instrument. It's like, are you calling my granddaughter a whore? Whoa! It's a cultural difference.
It's totally fine where I'm from. It's a real way to make a living.
But yeah, and then she's like, you speak well for a barbarian, she said, and reached out to grip my arms in a friendly gesture. Visitors are rare, especially those so courteous. Come with me, and I will show you beauty, and you will speak to me of what its use might be. So this, like, obviously Shehyn is just testing him through this whole process. She's just trying to get a feel for him when his guard is down, when he doesn't realize he's being tested.
Oh, that's
obviously when you're, if she just came up and was like, I am Shehyn, she's going to get a different Kvothe.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to mention earlier, and I kind of forgot when she keeps pushing him on the wall and keeps pushing him on what is beautiful. Like she's, she's giving him outs. She's giving him a chance to just be like, just go with what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
And I don't even necessarily think she's trying to give him out. I think she's just asking questions and trying to get him to talk and to show who he is.
I guess what I'm saying, though, is in most cases, most people would just be like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, it's useful.
Yeah, but she wants to keep him talking. So, like, that to me, this is like, when I talk about, like, when I would approach girls, like, this is the kind of thing you would do, is you ask a question and then they respond, and you give a little response to that, but then you ask a question again, and it's just, you're just continually asking questions to get them to open up and talk, and then kind of figure out who you're talking to. The more you can get the other person to talk, the more you're going to learn about them.
I just figure out what they're interested in. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
And if you got their guard down and they're just being they feel comfortable, and they're just saying what they believe in that moment, then you're learning who they are. If they understand that there's some kind of agenda behind it, then their guard is up, and you're going to get completely you're not going to get their personality. You're not going to get someone's personality when their guard's up. No, you're not going to see who they are.
No, you're going to get some emotional reaction to the present circumstances of how they
getting
feel.
Who they want you to see, not who they are.
Yeah.
So she's approaching it in a way where she's able to kind of learn about him. But then I like that he's like, I look down, regret. I cannot. I am waiting for one inside. I nodded. If they've gone inside, I expect you will be waiting some time. She tapped my loot case, then did the same to my travel sack and the sword on my hip. Give these to the boy, and he will take them inside for you. She's basically like, go put your dildo away, you freak. Walking around carrying a dildo out in public. What is wrong with you?
Like, I'm not going to be seen with you.
Propositioning my granddaughter to be a prostitute and play an instrument?
Well, suggesting.
Yeah. It's like, it's just a lute. Like, you are a freak. That's what you call that thing? A lute? Disgusting.
You named it?
Yeah, you named your dildo? But yeah, and then she's like, without waiting for me to reply, she began to tug at my travel sack. Yeah, get that shit out of here. And so he's like, he goes, couldn't think of a graceful way to not go with it. So he's like, every culture is different, but one thing is always true. The surest way to give offense is to refuse the hospitality of your host. Especially when your host is like, put your dildo away. And you're being like, no, I like to have it and swing it around. But yeah, and then so it's like, what would you say, what would you say of such a thing? She asked, gesturing to the hidden valley. It is much like Ademre. She patted my arm affectionately. You have the gift of saying without saying. That is rare for one as you are. So he's doing well. He's doing a good job on giving answers that allow a lot of room for interpretation.
Yeah.
And then when she's like, would you call this beautiful? She asked after we had looked a while. Yes. Why? Uncertainty. Perhaps it's movement. The stone moved, not at all. And you called it beautiful as well. Questioning. It is not the nature of stone to move. Perhaps it is beauty to move according to your nature. She nodded as if my answer pleased her. We continued to watch the water. Have you heard of the Lathantha? She asked. No, regret. But perhaps I simply do not know the word. And she shows him the sword tree. She's like, the Lathantha. Would you say it is beautiful? Watched it for a moment. Curiosity. I would enjoy seeing it more closely. That's not allowed. Emphatic. So you get right off of the bat there that this tree is extremely important to them. It's not something that you can even get close to. And also there's the fact that getting close to it is dangerous.
He gets close to it.
Yeah, well, eventually. But yeah, even like in this moment, she's like, nah, you can look from here. This is close enough. This is all you get. But yeah, and he's like, I nodded and watched it as well as I could from this distance. It had high arching branches like an oak, but its leaves were broad, flat, and spun in odd circles when they caught the wind. Yes, I answered after a long while. She's like, why did it take you so long to decide? I was considering the reason for its beauty, I admitted, and I could say it both moves and doesn't move according to its nature, and that grants it beauty. But I do not think that is the reason. Why then? I watched it for a long time. I do not know. What do you consider the reason? Simply is. That is enough. I nodded, feeling slightly foolish about the elaborate answers I had been given before. But there again, it's like she's just asking question after question after question and just getting him like explain. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to understand you. Understand this person that I'm talking to, this stranger that is learning our ways. And she's testing him 100%.
Yeah.
And she does it in a masterful way where Kvothe doesn't realize he's being tested, but he does well. It gives him a chance to shine because word games are his game.
Yeah, it's like I guess she's not introducing this alternate way of thinking, but she's like testing him in his ability to think in that way. Yeah, and luckily he's been moving that way, so.
Yeah. And she's just seeing what, where he's at, and the fact that he has adopted so much of their culture and their ways and in such a short amount of time is benefiting him. But I like too that the fact that she's like, that is enough, because it reminds me of Denna going, when he's sitting there giving all the reasons for why the Dracus might be able to breathe fire. And then Denna is just like, yeah, I don't know. It, eats wood. So it seems like, yeah, it would breathe fire. It would need fire. Wood burns. Like, yeah, makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, where he's going on and on. I think he's using like pretty scientific terms and everything else. And then, yeah, she's just like, yeah, no, that seems like that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. In a similar situation, like he seems like he's trying to impress Shehyn with his answers. He's giving thoughtful answers, and he's thinking, and like in this situation, he's thinking about it really hard, and then he gives his answer, and then he's like, what do you think about that? And she's like, I don't know, it just is. That's all there is to it. And
he's sitting there looking stupid.
Man, and then she asks him, like, do you know of the Katan? She asked, surprising me. I now had an inkling of how important such things were to the Adem, so I hesitated to give an open answer. However, I did not want to lie either. Perhaps, apology? She nodded. You are cautious. Yes, are you Shehyn? Shehyn nodded. When did you suspect me of being who I am? When you asked of the Katan, I said. When did you suspect me of knowing more than a barbarian should? When I saw you set your feet? Another silence. And he's like, Shehyn, why do you not wear the red like other mercenaries? She made an unfamiliar gesture. Has your teacher told you why they wear red? He's like, I didn't think to ask, I said, not wanting to imply Tempe neglected my training. I ask you then, I thought a moment, so their enemies will not see them bleed? Approval. Why then do I wear white? The only answer I could think of chilled me. Because you do not bleed? She gave a partial nod. Also, because if an enemy draws my blood, she should see it as her fair reward. I like that line because it's fucking badass. Like, it's like, badass. I'm a fucking boss. That's why.
She's
you cut me, you earn that shit.
She's a regular Don Johnson, right?
Yeah, and you get their matriarchal society and the fact that the way she says it, and also if an enemy draws my blood, she should see that it's her fair reward. Which establishes, because that's the first time when you get here, this is when you first discover that it is a matriarchal society. And now all those lines that Tempe had said, like, you can get an extra woman, or like, do you need any more women to have your back? And, those kind of things, which seem like slights and insults. Then it's at these moments, like, all of a sudden, then you get here and you're like, oh. So, like, the women are the fighters in this society. They're the dominant fighting force of this society. So this is a completely different arrangement than you see anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's especially important in the examples you just gave, where he's not insulting them. He's being rational.
He's being earnest. He's earnest. It's hilarious because it sounds like it's an shit talking insult.
Yeah.
And he's just taking a dig at, these people's egos. But in his mind, he's paying them a great compliment.
And he's challenging them much further as well.
Yeah. he's saying like, get your best warriors, get as many of your strong as you can possibly get. But yeah, and he's like, I fretted silently, doing my best to mimic proper Adem composure. After an appropriate polite pause, I asked, what will become of Tempe? And she's like, that remains to be seen. Are you not concerned for yourself? It's like, I'm more concerned for Tempe. And so this is where you get the kind of this sleeping mind aspect of him in this society, where he's like, the sword tree spun patterns on the wind. It was almost hypnotic. So I think this is interesting because when he looks at the tree, this is a moment where he's like starting to see the name of the wind. Like he looks at it, kind of sees the pattern. And Elodness talked about, like, if you want to go find the name of the wind, you got to go to the edge of the world. You go to these dangerous places. And so this spinning tree with these knives, you look at it and you start to see the name of the wind. He's saying it's hypnotic. And then when he slips himself into spinning leaf, then he sees the name of the wind and he's able to call it. But this is a place where it's real conducive for naming. And then you have this fight with Shehyn, and he's talking about the steps she's taking. She's taking these perfect steps. This is not something you're like, if you're playing a video game, yeah, sure, you might get the moves down where you know exactly how far the distance you can step back, so you're only moving back is exactly as far as you need, but that's not realistic to like normal fighting. You don't train to be that good. No, the best boxers in the world, every now and again you might run into a boxer that's real good at playing defense, but he's still getting hit. Even, Mayweather would get hit, but even though he's a great defensive fighter, he's still going to get hit. They, move in ways where it seems otherworldly on their ability to not get hit. So when he's talking about like she's taking these perfect steps, when she only needs to move a centimeter, she just moves a centimeter. She doesn't move more than that. And then when he calls the name of the wind later on, when he's going through the tree, he's like taking steps, and he mentions that like the moves that he's making, he's doing all their little different moves defensively to avoid the falling of the leaves. And he's like, I realized I was moving like Shehyn. I was taking perfect steps. When I only needed to move a centimeter, I only moved a centimeter, that kind of thing. So I think that the reason for their strong ability is, one, that they're in an environment where it's conducive for naming, that Kvothe picks up on it immediately. As soon as he looks at the tree, he starts to see the patterns of the wind. And when he slips into spinning leaf, he's able to call the name of the wind. But so I think their abilities, I think that they are utilizing, accessing like that sleeping mind.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to say, Shehyn's basically sort of doing like magic through her body movements.
Correct.
It's a type of magic. She's accessing something.
She's at least in that mind state where maybe she doesn't have the naming ability, but she's in that sleeping mind. She's like accessing her sleeping mind so that she's just able to just instinctively move the proper distances to avoid your contact, and she's just moving perfectly, which seems like a sleeping mind type of state where it's an instinctual thing rather than an analytical thought process.
Well, so kind of like Kvothe in the woods by himself playing music.
Yeah, he's just instinctively playing the notes. He's not thinking through like, I'm going to play these chords and this kind of thing. He just like sees the name of, sees a wind turning a leaf or whatever, and he plays, instinctually plays that sound. It's a similar thing when they're like accessing their sleeping mind, because the fact that in the moment that he was fully in sleeping mind mode is the time where he felt like he was moving like Shehyn. I think that's significant. And the fact that when he looks at the tree, he sees the pattern of the wind, and there's got to be some kind of reason why they are like a supernaturally good at fighting. It cannot just be training. That doesn't make any sense, because then it's just a technique that if once you learn it, then everybody can do that just with practice. But they are just unbelievably good.
So the tree itself, that area, is like the questioning hall.
Yeah.
But probably to a greater degree, it seems like.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, I'd say it's more obvious. I mean, you have these spinning...
It's a similar thing, yeah. Like, I mean, he sits there and stares at the spinning debris or whatever and leaves, and he's able to kind of start to see patterns. It's a similar thing here. And so he talks about like a loading on that bridge. He's like, why is this a good spot? And he's like, this is, an edge. It's a dangerous spot in these kind of places. These are the places where you can see these things.
And so they train there with the storms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they are on an edge. They're on a mountain that cuts off the land. It's an edge. It's dangerous. They're by a dangerous tree. The storms, everything about their life is built around like they're living on the edge. And so, and then they're training in this environment, and Kvothe is able to sense it and pick it up on it, even though it's not consciously. I don't think Rothfuss mentions that he's seen that pattern right there, and then she's making the perfect move, and then he's making the perfect move when he's sleeping mind. I think that's got to be the clue on to why they're so good.
No, I mean that would also make a lot more sense. Also, that they weren't just nomadic; they eventually landed here. And I know we get that story about how they eventually landed there, but this would make all the more sense, right, as to why they would also find their place there.
And why they would choose it. Not even like, they just ended up there by accident. It would be the perfect kind of place. If your purpose was to kind of master these kind of things, this would be the place you go to. This would be a place where if the sleeping mind is being triggered and you're having access to these kind of things, if you're trying to train to be a great fighter, that's the kind of place you would want to go to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and that's another very important part. We know they train. We know they're fighting against the best. So it's almost like 300, right? They train for this, but it is otherworldly. I mean, the amount of speed and the lack of, I love the idea of no wasted movement. Like, because if you know that, if you're confident of that and you're able to do it, it makes it effortless. No wonder what's her face is pushing Kvothe away and then just turning her back and very easily defending herself, because he was never a threat to begin with. It's not even defending herself; it's just pushing him away.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a huge advantage if that's the kind of state you were training in. And so, I mean, it's different. And so
I was just thinking how funny it would be if, just to troll your audience, like when that scene happens, instead of it like being all these intricate moves, it's literally just slap.
Yeah.
They just flail.
Yeah, well, that's the adaptation. Yeah. They just slap really fast. So like, it's a blur, but they're just like flapping their hands in your face.
So the great defense of Shehyn is literally just like when the kid swings his arms.
Or it's like I think it's like Naked Gun, where the girl goes to slap him and he catches both her arms, and then a third hand comes up and smacks him in the face. He's like, "What the fuck? Where did that come from?" Yeah, that's the way to do it. But and there's got to be an explanation for why the women would be better fighters, just because if because the men are getting the same training. Doesn't make any sense for in the context of our world. There's got to be something different about them, because in the context of our world, if you had all the men and all the women training in the same way, especially fighting, the men are going to be the dominant force in that art. That's just the way it is.
Physically, but just physicality.
It's just the way it is. Fighting is going to be the men's domain. And so if they're all getting the same training, there's got to be a reason why the women would be more dominant. And I think what helps that is maybe there's, for some reason, the women are more naturally gifted towards accessing the sleeping mind because of, their temperament is different. And so it could be something along those lines, is that in that environment that they're in, and with the different temperament that women have compared against men, is they have better access to the sleeping mind than men. And so when they're training, that they are getting better at it than the men are, because they're better accessing the sleeping mind than the men are. So it could be something along those lines. I think that's a way you could explain it that would make sense in the context of this world.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously that especially makes sense if if the sleeping mind type aspect is the key, right? If that's
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, and then so they start fighting, and I like the fact that like the way they describe it is she's like she moved like nothing I'd ever seen. It wasn't that she was fast, though she was fast, but that was not the heart of it. Shehyn moved perfectly, never taking two steps when one would do, never moving 4 inches when she only needed 3. She moved like something out of a story, more fluid and graceful than Florian dances. And then when he's talking about the moves, he's like, Shehyn came towards me slowly, making hands like knives. I countered with catching rain. Then I made climbing iron and fast inward, but could not touch her. I like it for a couple of reasons. I like one because of the way he uses the names. It's a way to describe fight scenes without getting in the way of the reader and allowing the reader's imagination to determine the fight scene for themselves, to make it up in their head. Because I envision a fight when this is happening. I don't like get lost in the names. I envision my own fight. And so it allows you to envision your own fight. And you can make it perfect in your head, And so you're not trying to figure out what they're trying to describe. You just think of your own fight and make it in your head and make it perfect.
Yeah,
and so it gives that freedom.
That's something that it's really impressive. It can seem somewhat simple for an author to make that choice, but I mean, naturally your mind would go to, all right, I'm writing a fight scene. How do I, he's landing a punch, he's missing. And when you read badly written fight scenes, they're horrible. Everything slows down when it's supposed to be speeding up,
Yeah.
And then there's just like mundane details that you're like, man, this is not, it seems like it's important but then you just see a glaring example of like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Sanderson's really good at fight scenes, and he goes into more detail, but he also utilizes this technique as well. Is like he's got the different fight stances and those kind of things. So he goes into more detail on what's happening in the fight scene, and he does a really, really good job of it. He's one of the best. But he even utilizes a similar technique that Rothfuss uses here. But we also get that it's very similar to like Florian with her hands, 1,000 hands, and all those kind of euphemisms for the descriptions. So you get that kind of aspect of it, is they got kind of like a Fae type of culture, and which it gives them an ancient feel to their culture, that they describe something in the similar way that Florian describes her thing, that they do a similar thing with their fighting, and it's practical. They can talk about different fighting techniques without giving away the movements to strangers, because it would be like it's like a hidden language.
It does, yeah. It does definitely also make it seem older, right? More established, I guess, like ancient. And that in itself makes it more credible, right? It just makes it seem more, and you accept it. It's just, I mean, if you accept it. But yeah, that's kind of what it forces.
And I like Shehyn took one single perfect step. Why do you weep? Shehyn asked as she made Heron falling. Are you ashamed? Are you in fear? I blinked my eyes to clear them. My voice was harsh from the exertion and emotion. You are beautiful, Shehyn, for you is in the stone of the wall, the water of the stream, and the motion of the tree in one. She blinked, and in her moment of surprise, I found myself firmly gripping her shoulder and arm. I made thunder upward, but instead of being thrown, Shehyn stood still and solid as a stone. But I love that fact that he catches her off guard and then just immediately tries to take advantage of the situation. Not really like thinking about it, like I'm going to fucking take a cheap shot, but he immediately tries to take a cheap shot on an old lady, which is hilarious to me. Especially given that, then shortly after this, he's fighting a 12-year-old girl and trying to take her out. Yeah, I mean, he's not above taking advantage of a situation.
Yeah, I mean, in an instant, she becomes intensely powerful.
Yeah, she's just absent-mindedly. She freed herself with break lion and made threshing wheat. I flew 6 feet and hit the ground. But then not only that, but he was like, she did it in a gentle tossing of 6 feet, where I'm not going to get jacked up. She gently tossed me 6 feet.
Well, and because we were told before she never gets touched, and he's not getting close. He's getting somewhat close, but clearly he's not going to be able to touch her.
He's getting as close as she's willing to let him.
Yeah. And once she grips his shoulder and arm, reading the first time, you're not sure. I was like, oh, shit. Kvothe is amazing. He can do everything perfectly, right? Because you're kind of thinking, well, maybe he is quick. And, of course, that gets baited back. But in this, instead of being thrown, Shehyn stood still and solid as a stone. And then that's when, she breaks through and throws him 6 feet in the air.
Yeah.
But gently.
Yeah, gently tosses you 6 feet. Yeah, and then she explains, that Tempe has both taught you and not taught you, which is both bad and good. And then she shows him gives him one of the leaves, which shows you he cuts himself on the leaf, and you see that these things are like almost like razor blades that are falling. I mean, they're extremely dangerous. He's able to just cut himself by touching this tree. It's that sharp and that hard. These are heavy leaves that are broad and flat, but it's not regular leaves. This is a completely different type of tree. It's foreign from our world. And where does it come from? Why is this tree like that? Why is there only one tree? And why is it in a spot that is like on an edge where they got this great fighting skills that they're able to develop? And Kvothe is able to kind of develop it by practicing with them there. And, and then he's accessing his naming and seeing the wind and all this. And they got a gray stone that's in their like fighting area. Like, it seems like, is this a tree from the Fae? Is this like a creation of a shaper? Because this seems different.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It doesn't have that smell like Rowan, right?
Yeah.
Because we were getting that for a while. And it's interesting. I mean, it comes not long after the Kvothe, too. It's like, man, what's with all these trees? Like, there's something going on here. Like, this ever-present power in the world within nature itself. But yeah, the tree, I mean, fucking murder tree, dude. A crazy ass murder tree. It's nuts.
Extremely dangerous. and then she goes in to explain like why he taught him but didn't teach him. So she's basically like, he showed you these movements, but he didn't tell you, how to utilize them properly and how to take advantage of them. Whereas she's like, you don't know where to attack. Like, do you attack the root or the branch or the leaf or the branch? And he's like, you attack the branch. And she's like, okay, but you don't know where the branch is on the body. Like, you don't hit the legs. You don't go at the arms. You go at the shoulder and the hips, and you get people off balance and spin them. So she kind of explains to him how to fight. And he sees it. And so like, she's like, I thought for a long moment. She asked her, like, where on my body is a weakness? And he's like, I thought for a long moment, then tapped her knee. Though she gave no sign of it, I sensed her surprise. And I tapped the opposite side under her armpit, then her shoulder. She's like, show me. I came in close to her, set one leg close against her knee, and made thunder upward, throwing her to the side. I was surprised at how little force was required. However, instead of being thrown into the air to tumble to the ground, Shehyn gripped my forearm. I felt a jolt run up my arm and was pulled one staggering step to the side. Rather than being thrown, Shehyn used her grip as leverage so her feet came down beneath her. She took a single perfect step in her balance and had her balance again. Shehyn looked me straight in the eye for a long speculative moment, then turned to leave, gesturing for me to follow. So he passes the first step with her.
She's a beast.
Yeah.
She's a fucking beast.
Yeah, and I think the if you look at it from the perspective of they're like, it's a sleeping mind guided type of fighting, then I think it becomes easier to wrap your head around why they're so good. Because just training alone, if you have the proper technique and the other person doesn't, like if you're practicing MMA and they're just randomly practicing, you're probably gonna fucking whoop their ass. But they're beating 4-on-1, 5-on-1, and just whooping the shit out of people. And unless you're like watching some unrealistic Batman movie, where he's just dominating 10 dudes, that doesn't happen. Like maybe you get lucky once every now and again, but you're not consistently going up against 5-on-1 odds and winning. You're getting fucking whooped in those situations. There's too many people.
Well, and also we see it with Tempe. They have no qualms about challenging people.
No,
right?
yeah. I mean, to the point that he's like, it's preposterous that 2 or 3 people could beat me.
Yeah. Well, and also considering people know how to fight.
Yeah.
Right. There are going to be people in that room that are going to know how to fight, but he knows none of them are of the Adem. So it's like, well, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a majorly advanced level that they're fighting at. And so there's got to be a reason on it. I mean, you can go and just suspend disbelief. Like, I don't watch Batman movies and be like, it's unrealistic. No way. He would have got dominated in that fight. Like, they all had guns. There was like 10 of them with guns. It doesn't make any sense.
You yell this out at the theater?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do that. So, like, I suspend disbelief when I go and see Batman movies. So you could do that. But Rothfuss tends to have an explanation for why he makes the decisions that he makes. So I tend to look for them and try to figure out ways, given the context of the world, that would make sense. And to me, it makes more sense to say that there's some kind of naming aspect to the world than to just suspend disbelief. I don't think it's necessary to suspend disbelief in that way. I think you come up with explanations given the magic of the world to explain why they would be so supernaturally good at fighting.
Well, the tree definitely says a lot. I mean, it's highly suggestive that there's something going on here. We don't hear about this anywhere else. For the longest time, I like, for whatever reason, well, I know why, because they're kind of close together. For the longest while, I confused the Kvothe being in this tree.
So yeah, there's only a couple prominent trees, so.
And the chapters are somewhat close together.
Yeah.
Kind of in that area.
Yeah, and as time goes by, the details kind of bleed together. But yeah, but those trees would stick out. But yeah, and so, but and there's going to be more I'm going to want to dive into, because I think, once you get into the 99 stories and how old their swords are, and when the swords were used, like in the Battle of Drazen Tor, the sword that Kvothe get, it was used in the Battle of Drazen Tor, and that wasn't even the first person to hold it. So that's the Creation War. This sword was used during the Creation War and before the Creation War. So like the Adem swords go way the fuck back before the stealing of the moon. And so like there's aspects to the Adem that we'll dive into further when we start getting into their 99 stories and their swords and that kind of stuff. But this is a rich area for speculation on what the hell's going on with these worlds, and just this culture alone. There's a lot to speculate about them. So it's going to be fun as we go along. I think next time we're going to run into the end of this interaction where Shehyn will decide to give him a chance. She puts him under Vachette, and so he's going to go meet Vachette and hand her a stick to beat him down with. I mean, I love the first time he's like going and getting the best stick, kind of like he does with the acorns or whatever that the pine cones that Elodin wanted.
Yeah.
It's like, and then he's getting there like the perfect stick, and then she uses it to fucking whip him with it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, man. It's it starts out pretty brutal for him. He's finally got here, and seems like he's doing okay with Shehyn in that first circumstance, but yeah, they just beat him down.
Yeah, especially because he's going there to protect one of their own. Like, he's not going there to steal their magic fighting skills. He's going there to protect Tempe, one of them, and they're treating him like shit. And and there's reasons. It's understandable, and they don't trust him, so he's got to earn it. But it's being in Kvothe's head, it's hard to watch him being beaten down when he's being an extremely good person.
Yeah, I'd have some trouble with that. I'm not real good with someone yelling, even not even yelling at me.
No, I would not be a fan of whipping. That would not be my thing. I would not be cool with you whipping me or anybody whipping me. I'd be opposed to it.
I would be opposed. Okay, yeah. Well, that kind of goes without saying, but all right.
But yeah. So I think wrap it up there, and then we will be back next week with Kvothe taking some whippings.
Boom. Whip it.
All right. So peace out.
Yep.